321. Three Voldemorts make a show. A dozen or so cloaked figures were crawling through the forbidden forest. The tournament committee's emergency rescue team kept patrols on at night too. They didn't want to be discovered before they finished their mission. The closest danger zone to the Hogwarts camp was the Wolf Pack area, and the attackers guessed the champions would try for the treasure chest there. They planned to ambush the Hogwarts team in that stretch of trees. Suddenly, the leader, Fenrir Greyback, froze and raised a hand to halt the others. The scent of human blood, one of the cloaked figures hissed. "Very fresh. It's coming this way," another said softly. "It's here." Greyback signaled. The others drew their wands and crouched low. After Umbridge had finished tending her injured foot, she hurried toward the Acromantula's location. The Horcrux of Voldemort didn't know where the real nest was either. His plan was to control an Acromantula and have it lead them to the true lair. Then Lord Voldemort's scolding rippled straight into Umbridge's mind. "Idiot! Get out of the way!" Umbridge didn't move. A dozen silent spells shot toward her at once. At the critical moment, the Horcrux of Voldemort seized control of Umbridge's body. He forced her clumsy frame into a roll across the forest floor, dodging the incoming spells. He kept her rolling. Spells struck where she had been only moments earlier. Between rolls, the Horcrux made Umbridge lift her wand, and three small skulls emanating black mist flitted out. Each skull found one of the cloaked figures, dissolved into black mist, and burrowed into their faces and other openings. The three men collapsed, clutching their heads, shrieking in agony. "Ah!" Their screams cut through the quiet night like a blade, carrying on the still air for a long, hollow moment. The sudden, terrifying cries startled nearby creatures and turned the once calm forest into a place of tension and alarm. That was exactly what the Horcrux had intended. He recognized the group at a glance. The dark marks branded them as Death Eaters. With only Umbridge's body to use, he could cast spells, but could not afford a prolonged fight with these Death Eaters. He needed to draw the emergency rescue team to bog them down. After dodging another volley, he raised Umbridge's wand and snatched one of the nearby Death Eaters into the air, using him as a shield against more spells. The captive man's status panel in the air rapidly flared purplish red. The Horcrux made him fly into a cluster of other cloaked figures. The captive's panel burst with sparks as he careened through them. "Get out of the way!" Greyback roared, swiping his wand. A spell struck the flying man, boom, and an explosion erupted, followed by a raging wall of flame. Back at the emergency rescue office, two officials on duty were idly playing wizard's chess while four others rested in lounge chairs. The bell on the desk suddenly began to shake, ring, ring, ring. The four officials jerked awake. "Something's happening. There's an intruder on the grounds. Arnie, get the Auror department and request backup at once." Arnie, a man temporarily transferred from the Auror department, had the quickest way to contact them. Of the officials on duty at any time, at least one was always from the Aurors. No one dared delay. The other five used a teleport charm to get to the tournament grounds. Once Arnie had reported the intrusion, he joined them as well. He arrived to a wave of heat in his face. The forbidden forest was on fire. 5 officials were already battling the blaze. "Where's the intruder?" Arnie demanded. "They ran off before we got here," a young agent said. "We need to control the fire." In pairs, split into 3 groups. One group stays here to put out the fire. The other 2 search for the intruders. Their strength won't be trivial. Don't engage them head on. Send a distress signal the instant you find them, said a middle-aged official. He was a mid-level leader from the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes and the highest-ranking person present. No one objected. Arnie was placed on a search team with the young agent. She followed him in silence, a red light briefly flickering in her eyes. Arnie stared toward the direction Umbridge had fled. There, he sensed a familiar aura, an active Horcrux. "Well spotted," the young agent murmured. "He must have possessed the intruder. Clever way to escape." "It looks like things got dangerous just now," Arnie smirked. "That direction, Acromantula's? I'll coordinate. In 30 minutes, you can begin your operation on your end." "Yes, Master." Umbridge leaned against a tree, panting. "Whew, Master, have we shaken off those Death Eaters?" she gasped. "They're not following. Continue searching for the Acromantulas. Lord Voldemort's voice said in her head. The Horcrux reflected on the encounter. The Death Eaters had clearly been thugs sent to capture Harry. He hadn't expected to run into them, but it was a fortunate interruption. At least it let him plant surveillance near the group who had sent them. The 3 skulls that had invaded the Death Eaters had housed a parasitic control charm he'd prepared as a contingency. If that group had succeeded in taking Harry, those skulls would have given him a chance to seize the boy through the back door. Now, however, the commotion would ring alarm bells at the Auror department. He had to find the real acromantula nest quickly. With enough acromantulas, he could create a far greater chaos. Only amid that chaos would he have any chance to obtain Harry Potter's blood. Don't rest. Hurry, the Horcrux urged through Umbridge. After the explosion, the werewolves hadn't pursued Umbridge. Their goal had been to kill her and leave without exposing themselves, but the uproar had put them on the defensive. Greyback, we're exposed, one of them growled nervously. Fenrir Greyback was furious. They hadn't been in position long before everything went wrong. His plan to hide in the danger zone and ambush the champions was ruined. Those Aurors will take a while to arrive. I'll command the wolf pack to attack the Hogwarts camp directly, Greyback barked. He wasn't a strategist. He chose to throw his strength forward. As the most powerful werewolf present, Greyback had the ability to command wolf packs. That was why they had hidden in the wolf area. And how will we get away afterward? Will Barty still meet us at this point? A younger werewolf protested. I'll open a gateway out of the Forbidden Forest, Greyback said. In truth, he couldn't open such advanced wards. He lied to marshal the others as expendable cannon fodder. Since the champions and the emergency rescue staff all had teleportation available for the tournament, the forest's barriers weren't set to ban apparition. When the time came, he could simply apparate away. There was no need to use the gate at all. They hadn't apparated in to begin with, simply because they hadn't been here before. At the Hogwarts camp, the 3 champions woke with the sound of distant thunder. Was that an explosion? Harry asked, unsure if he had dreamed it. It wasn't a dream, Matthew said. I heard the blast and human screams. He directed the transfigured birds he'd planted his eyes toward the noise. Let's not rush into the commotion, Cedric said. Maybe intruders came for Harry. We have invigoration draughts in our loot. We should stay ready. Matthew handed out 3 bottles. Each of them drank one. His transfigured birds, already in the air, arrived at the scene. Through the birds' eyes, he saw the flames and that the person who'd caused the disturbance had already left. The emergency rescue team was arriving too. He spread the birds in every direction to look for suspicious traces. Soon he spotted 2 groups, one of a dozen or so people and another of a single person, running in different directions. Matthew had a feeling they were Death Eaters. No one else would send that many officials to stir trouble in the tournament grounds. They're heading for the Wolfpack area, he said, checking the map. The larger group was moving toward the wolf territory, already at its edge. Those cloaked figures stopped, and with a glance at the moon, ripped off their hoods and transformed into werewolves. The leader howled, and in answer, ghost shadow wolves began to gather. The ghost shadow wolves were a terrifying pack, creatures that manipulated shadow. Individually, they were almost as dangerous as a Class 4X monster, but in a pack, they were exponentially worse. Enough of them, and an enemy would be flooded with shadow enemies. Even some Class 5X creatures would struggle. Those cloaked figures are actually werewolves, Matthew said. Ghost shadow wolves slid out of the darkness around the werewolves, a pack of 20 or so forming quickly. Since outside guests were now involved, Matthew decided to call in a substitute fighter. He drove one of his transfigured birds to a prearranged spot deeper in the forest. He hadn't only placed birds as eyes, he'd also stationed Preserved Egg waiting there. Preserved Egg's strength had grown considerably. He was eager for a proper fight and to try out the runic magics he'd been mastering. The bird found him curled on a branch. He had heard the commotion and was waiting for Matthew's signal. Is it my turn? Who do I fight? Meow, he chirped with excitement. The transfigured bird relayed Matthew's words. There's a job for you, werewolves and a pack of ghost shadow wolves. Follow me. A pair of tiny wings of wind formed behind Preserved Egg, and he took to the sky. Let's go, Meow! The bird and the cat flew fast and reached the werewolves as they finished assembling the shadow pack. Werewolves are short-range fighters after transforming. Deal with them from the air. Watch the shadow magic of those ghost shadow wolves, the transfigured bird instructed in Matthew's voice. The noise of wings drew attention. Greyback and the werewolves looked up. Something in the sky, Greyback snarled. Not allies, then. Enemies. He ordered the ghost shadow wolves to attack the flying things. The wolves howled. Black shadow spikes erupted from the ground and lunged toward the dark specks overhead. Light dissipates and weakens the shadows, the transfigured bird warned. Preserved egg. Use your illumination spell. Runic script condensed around preserved egg, pouring out a blinding flash. Light was the bane of shadow magic, and the shadow spikes began to dissolve as they passed through the intense radiance. By the time the spikes neared preserved egg, they were little more than drifting ash and no longer a threat. Matthew took action. On the ground, the werewolves and shadow wolves still hadn't figured out what their enemy was. If not for the obvious wings of wind on its back, preserved egg would have blended perfectly into the night. After a quick probe, Fenrir Greyback decided this opponent was troublesome. Flying foes were a perfect counter to werewolves, and Greyback suspected the attacker belonged to the rescue team. He didn't want to tangle with Aurors, though. They could arrive at any moment, and the longer they stalled, the less likely their mission would succeed. Scatter. Find cover, retreat when you can, and find Harry Potter. Greyback howled, issuing orders to the werewolves in packs. This was forest country. Cover was everywhere. The wolves dispersed, melting into the trees and using the undergrowth to pull back. Preserved egg. Use fire to flush them out, the Transfiguration Owl said in Matthew's voice. From inside his Transfiguration clone, Matthew couldn't directly sense the hidden enemies. Preserved egg also lacked combat experience, and Matthew didn't want it to get ground down fighting werewolves. It was simpler to force them into the open, set the forest on fire. Okay, meow, Preserved egg chirped. Moments later, 10 giant fireballs, each about a meter across, formed in midair. They streaked downward like meteors, a blazing shower plunging into the dense forest. The fireballs hit the treetops and floor with violent explosions, sending up sheets of flame and waves of scorching heat. The blasts ignited the air, forming mushroom clouds of fire that leapt from tree to tree. Branches cracked and split under the temperature, the air thick with smoke and the scent of ash. The 10 fireballs landed in a circle, encircling the werewolves and their packs. Preserved egg began to pant. Its reserves of magical energy weren't as deep as Matthew's, and sustained spell work drained it quickly. But its owner was a potions master. Of course it carried potions. A semicircular pouch was stuck to its belly. With its invisible hand, Preserved egg rummaged inside and pulled out a potion. One swallow later, its magical energy surged back. The blaze spread fast, and the wolves howled. Trapped, the shadow wolves let loose long, keening cries, condensing the shadows into a giant black eagle that launched at Preserved egg in the air. The shadow wolves' shadow magic had fused many shadows into that monstrous bird. Preserved egg flashed Lumos, bathing the forest in light, but this time the spell only chipped away at the eagle's surface. The black bird kept closing. Preserved egg opened its wings of wind and streaked away, the wings noisy but blindingly fast. The shadow eagle pushed its speed but could not catch up. From above, Preserved egg spotted several werewolves who had exposed themselves to avoid the flames. Lightning sparked from the runes and magical energy before it and leapt down as a bolt, striking one werewolf instantly. The creature screamed and then went limp. Preserved egg wagged its tail. The tail split off into a dozen black furballs that fell and reformed into black cats. Those cat clones became its eyes on the ground, quickly locating more targets. Like a bomber, Preserved egg kept raining magical attacks on the ground while dodging the shadow eagle. The shadow wolves adapted, splitting the giant eagle into several smaller shadow black eagles to cut off Preserved egg from multiple directions. Preserved egg wore them down with repeated Lumos casts. When some of the eagles dissolved, they scattered into a barrage of shadow black spikes. Preserved egg didn't have time to cast another spell. It activated the necklace around its neck, and a translucent shield sprang up. Matthew had given Preserved Egg some of the low-level magical items he no longer needed. They weren't useful to him now, but they could protect the little construct. The shadow spikes slammed into the shield until it failed, but the brief protection bought Preserved Egg time to cast Lumos again, dispersing the shadow spikes. Freed from the encirclement, Preserved Egg resumed bombing the ground. After more than 10 minutes, the shadow wolves on the ground were dealt with. The werewolves were gone as well. Most had been knocked down, and several had died. A few burned through the flames in a desperate charge. Most of them are dealt with, but a few escaped. They rushed into the burning forest, Preserved Egg said, a little disgruntled. You did very well, Preserved Egg, the Transfiguration Owl said. Control the fire. Don't let it spread. Do I have to put out the fire too? Preserved Egg looked at the inferno it had started and felt instantly overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Matthew and the other two had already left their original campsite, which had been close to the wolf pack. To avoid danger, Matthew had taken Harry and Cedric away before Preserved Egg engaged. The three rode a flying mount, heading away from the battlefield. After a time, the mount's duration expired, and they landed on a patch of grass. What happened back there? Such a big fire, Harry said, watching the red glow on the horizon. Good thing we retreated, or we might have been caught in it, Cedric replied. They had just seen the mushroom cloud of the flames, a spectacle no one wanted to be near. Matthew had no time to answer. He was multitasking, monitoring Preserved Egg's fight and using another Transfiguration Owl to track a lone black-robed figure in the Forbidden Forest. He already knew that the figure was Umbridge. The Horcrux Voldemort Matthew had placed on Umbridge had been a test to see if an active Horcrux left in the open would draw out other Horcrux manifestations. To reduce surprises, he'd left a tracking spell on Umbridge and positioned Transfiguration clones near her home. He had even arranged for a thief to steal and transfer the Horcrux through several hands until it finally reached her. Horcrux Voldemort never suspected he'd been watched. As Matthew watched, he realized Umbridge was heading for Aragog. Through the owl's eyes, he saw her controlling an acromantula and driving it toward the nest. Aragog isn't easy to deal with, he thought, and Preserved Egg's reserves are getting low. Even at full power, a Preserved Egg would struggle with Aragog. His bird clones didn't carry much magical energy. They had no spare reserves to stop Umbridge. And then he saw the acromantulas pouring from their nest. Umbridge, or more precisely Horcrux Voldemort, had succeeded in controlling Aragog. Aragog really produced a lot of offspring, Matthew muttered. In this situation, he had to intervene himself. Preserved Egg was too depleted to handle a swarm of acromantulas. A thought crossed his mind. He had prepared a vial of Harry's blood, tampered with it to add ingredients that would cause occasional magical blockages if used in resurrection. If Umbridge's Horcrux Voldemort obtained a portion of that blood and used it, the resurrected form would suffer from intermittent power loss. Letting another, controllable Voldemort stir things up could even draw out the silent, resurrected Horcrux Voldemort. Matthew knew was hiding somewhere. After a moment, he decided to let Umbridge obtain the tainted blood. At that moment, he sensed movement, werewolves charging out of the burning forest. Only 6 of the original dozen remained. The rest had fallen to Preserved Egg. The survivors' fur was scorched black, and the adrenaline gave them a temporary numbness to pain. Boss, only 6 of us are left, one werewolf cried. Matthew made a note. They had all taken a potion from the magical obstacle treatment center that allowed them to remain conscious after transforming. How are the rescue team members so strong? Another snarled. Barty said they were just temporary transfers. How are they stronger than veteran Aurors? Fenrir Greyback only grumbled that he'd settle things with Barty later. For now, he tracked Harry by the lingering scent on one of Harry's assignment books that Barty had used to locate him. I smell him. Follow me. Back with the dying fire, Preserved Egg had been trying to conjure water to put out the blaze, but it was exhausted. Ah, I can't anymore, it panted, finding a branch to sit on. You should learn finite incantatum, the Transfiguration Owl, still in Matthew's voice, said, landing beside it. Preserved Egg could cast some Hogwarts spells now, but only wandless and with great difficulty. It usually relied on runic magic. Take out my golem, the Transfiguration Owl ordered. Preserved Egg produced a humanoid object from the pouch on its belly, a delicate blonde girl in an off-the-shoulder black dress, long golden hair falling over pale shoulders. Her blue eyes glowed and silver markings ran along her neck. She was not human. This was Oriana, the first alchemical golem Matthew had acquired. "Master, do you have commands?" Oriana asked. "Assist me in casting spells," the owl replied. The owl fluttered onto Oriana's shoulder, and Preserved Egg hopped onto her head. Alchemical golems had a function Matthew had never used. Though not strong fighters, they could act as sources of magical energy. The power stored in a golem's memory core could be tapped to fuel spells. That energy ultimately came from the tower's core, and once depleted, the golem would have to return to the tower to recharge. The owl connected to the source within Oriana. "Finite incantatum," it intoned. Oriana raised her hand. A halo of light sprang from her feet and rippled outwards. Wherever the halo passed, the raging flames were snuffed out. In an instant, the great forest fire was extinguished. A spatial distortion opened, and Matthew, with Oriana and Preserved Egg, arrived near the group of werewolves who had escaped the inferno. 6 werewolves sprinted through the forest, running on all fours faster than any ordinary wolf. "Very close," Fenrir Greyback murmured, his voice low as he tracked the scent. "Harry Potter passed through here. They're just ahead." Having lost so many of his pack tonight, Greyback refused to give up. Harry Potter was within reach. He had to at least try. After dozens of heavy breaths, they caught sight of Harry and Cedric standing on a branch. One of the werewolves fixed on them, lowering his body as his digitigrade legs coiled like compressed springs, ready to leap. A silk thread shot out from the side and stuck to the tree at the werewolf's feet. The thread retracted with a flash of silver. A wet, dark stain bloomed across the creature's leg tendons. The werewolf launched himself toward Harry, but halfway through the leap, his leg tendons snapped, spraying blood into the air. For a moment, he didn't understand why the distance felt wrong. Then the pain in his legs clarified it. He looked down to see his ankles slashed halfway through, tendons severed and exposed. Inertia carried him in a short arc. He crashed hard in front of a tree stump. Another thread shot out from behind and anchored to the stump in front of him. This time, he could see clearly. Matthew Black was moving by firing and retracting silk from the device he'd taken earlier. It was one of the silk launchers they'd acquired before the tournament. It could fire a special spider silk and reel it back. Matthew had taken 2, using them in tandem so he could change direction on the fly through the trees. The wounded werewolf howled in fury and slashed with claws. Matthew fired another silk, stuck it to the werewolf's arm, and retracted. The twin tugs redirected the beast midair. Rotating his body, Matthew swung his greatsword. Dodging the claws, he slashed across the werewolf's arm. Squelch! Flesh tore, blood sprayed. The werewolf's entire right arm was shredded, hanging in a dozen flapping strips. Matthew let the silk from the werewolf's arm go, and the thread attached to the stump behind the creature continued to pull. Matthew adjusted his posture and hurled himself toward that stump. Silver light flashed across the werewolf's neck as Matthew landed on the wood. The creature's eyes went wild with terror. He raised his only working hand and clamped it against his throat, but it was useless. Shh! Blood boiled past his fingers. He choked and sputtered. The frantic will to survive in his eyes had no power against the arterial spray. A few coughing breaths later, he slumped and died. Matthew didn't pause. He looped through the trees, and before long, another werewolf clutched his throat and collapsed. The werewolf's strength was physical. After transforming, they had trouble keeping their wands steady. Their brute force meant nothing against Matthew's tactics. The remaining pack covered their necks with both hands to avoid the same fate. Fenrir Greyback roared, "Run! Everyone, run as fast as you can!" The other 4 bolted through the trees, and Matthew couldn't lock onto them with his silk as easily. Fenrir's skin crawled with a new, bitter realization. Matthew Black, using only items from the Tri-Wizard tournament, could slaughter them without casting a single obvious spell. They stood no chance in a straight fight. Fenrir sensed the battle was lost. With only the 4 of them left, it would be nearly impossible to reach Harry. While running, Fenrir fumbled in his pocket and pulled out an old pocket watch. The moment it left his hand, it tore free and flew through the air. My pocket watch, he shouted, aghast. It landed in the hand of a blonde woman in a long black dress. Fenrir hadn't even noticed her arrive. Everyone could see Oriana, the woman, though the small familiar on her shoulder and the black cat perched on her head remained hidden from view. Fenrir suspected this was one of the emergency rescue team members who'd started the forest fires and blocked them earlier. He'd never encountered someone so powerful. If this woman was the same person who'd fought them before, they were in real danger. Despair clawed at Fenrir. If he'd known, he wouldn't have transformed, and now, without his watch, he couldn't even apparat. He readied himself to fight to the death to reclaim it. Just as he lunged, countless vines erupted from the ground and wrapped him like a mummy. The same fate snared the other three werewolves. Fenrir saw the blonde woman raise her right hand, and a brief flash of light, Imperio. The last shard of his conscious will passed, and he fell under control. Moments later, a red glint filled his eyes. He was Matthew's puppet. Matthew had used Oriana to control the remaining werewolves, then had her toss the pocket watch back to Fenrir. Fenrir took the three moved werewolves and escaped using the pocket watch. Matthew let them go on purpose. The leading werewolf was a notorious Death Eater and a trusted henchman of Voldemort. Keeping him alive meant Matthew could track Voldemort's movements through that conduit. Malfoy had already been turned in secret, but Draco was young and his parents were watched carefully by Bellatrix. Fenrir's access to Voldemort was more direct. If anyone could reveal the other Horcruxes' locations, it might be him. Using his silk, Matthew swung up to the branch where Harry and Cedric were perched. "Matthew, do you know her?" Cedric asked. "No," Matthew replied. "She doesn't seem hostile toward us." He didn't have Oriana acknowledge Cedric and Harry publicly. She vanished again shortly after. He planned to have Oriana cooperate with his Transfiguration clone for missions he couldn't appear in himself, so he didn't want to tie them too closely now. Preserved Egg, the black cat, cloaked in a disillusionment charm, dropped down from Oriana's head. After a short distance, he canceled the charm and approached from another direction. A massive number of acromantulas was about to attack, and they needed a fast means of transport. Fang, predictably, had run off after the earlier explosion. Even if Hagrid's whistle could summon him back, Matthew had no faith Fang wouldn't bolt again when facing an acromantula colony. "Preserved Egg, why are you here?" Harry asked, surprised. "I'm here to help," the cat replied. "Matthew figured you might run into trouble off the competition grounds, so he had me on standby in the Forbidden Forest, meow." Preserved Egg leapt onto the branch and sat before the three. "Get on," he said. Matthew hopped onto the cat's back and gestured for Harry and Cedric to do the same. The blonde woman looked like trouble. It was best to move away. Preserved Egg bounded from branch to branch toward the spider colony. A little while later, the boys and the cat rounded a tree and froze. An appalling, almost sublime mass of spiders filled their view, massive, varied, legging and skittering until the forest itself seemed to rustle with them. In all of Matthew's lifetimes, he had never seen so many spiders gathered together. Harry and Cedric both felt their hearts pound, their throats dry, as if an invisible web tightened around their legs. Further on, a colossal spider with legs over 10 meters long moved slowly, Aragog. He was now under Umbridge's control, or rather, under the influence of Voldemort's Horcrux inside her. Umbridge stood on Aragog's back. To Matthew's surprise, the actual emergency rescue team members were here too. The 6 of them had originally been split into 3 groups, but the spider pursuit had driven them together. Shoulder to shoulder, they held the line. "Arnie, did you really alert the Auror office?" one middle-aged EMT asked, struggling to maintain a protective barrier. "I notified them before I came," Arnie snapped. "But their response, let's just say they're very efficient." A young Auror waved his wand and knocked a spider away. "Then we can only hope Dumbledore notices this sooner," another said. "The explosion should have been loud enough to carry beyond the Forbidden Forest," a different member added. They soon spotted the black cat moving through the trees. "Is that the Hogwarts champions?" Arnie cried. "We don't have the manpower to protect them," the middle-aged EMT groaned. "Look out! That monster's coming this way!" A young member's wand hand shook as more spiders broke through the line. Spells were killing few spiders. There simply seemed to be no end of them. Aragog turned and no longer approached the 6 emergency members. Umbridge had also spotted Matthew's group and ordered the spider colony to pounce on them. Spiders can climb, and Preserved Egg bounded away, weaving through branches to avoid their pursuit. Matthew had Oriana appear again. Everyone noticed her this time. Then the trees shuddered. The ground began to tremble like an enormous creature turning underground. The rumbling swelled to a quake. Trees swayed like ships in a storm. Smaller trunks were uprooted, roots flailing in the air. The panicked spiders scattered. The shaking and the thud of falling wood combined into a pounding, terrifying orchestra. Rocks split, fissures opened, and the earth swallowed what stood above. Matthew had Oriana enact a transfiguration that produced an earthquake. Umbridge fell from Aragog's back and scrambled to command the giant spider to shield her as trees crashed down. "Damn it! Why is someone else here to hinder me?" Voldemort's voice hissed inside Umbridge's head. How had another formidable operative appeared in this world? The quake had also exposed them. Matthew had planned to get close enough to Umbridge so she'd notice them. He wanted Umbridge to draw out the spider colony he'd arranged for her. They were now pinned beneath a fallen log. "Harry, you're hurt," Matthew said. "I am?" Harry blinked. "Here." Matthew pointed at Harry's arm. Harry glanced down. "Oh, it's just a scrape, not even bleeding." "Bandage it first," Matthew said casually. He wrapped a dressing around Harry's arm, then, with a thought, slipped back to the wizard tower and retrieved the prepared vial of Harry's blood. Returning to the forest, he sprinkled just a little of it on the ground near them. "Engorgement charm," Matthew cast, making Harry grow larger. The sudden swelling shoved the log aside and revealed them. The enlarged Harry also drew immediate attention. Umbridge's gaze snapped to him, and she noticed the bandage on his arm. "Master, Harry Potter is over there! He seems injured," Umbridge cried, exultant. Umbridge was ecstatic when she saw Harry Potter. The Horcrux of Voldemort inside her felt the same. "Hurry! Catch him for me!" Then the fragment of Voldemort remembered the terrifyingly powerful blonde woman standing not far away. "No, better let me handle this," the Horcrux snapped, and it seized control of Umbridge's body. The Horcrux made Aragog shriek. The cry sent the Acromantulas into a frenzy, driving them to swarm the blonde woman. But few of the spiders answered the call. Snakes, insects, rats, and ants are all sensitive to tremors. The massive disturbance from earlier had scattered most of Aragog's descendants. To the Horcrux's relief, the strange blonde woman didn't answer with more earthquakes. Instead, she used ordinary spells to clear a path through the spider swarm. The spider's momentum had been greatly reduced, but even a diminished swarm could still slow her for a moment. Horcrux Voldemort seized the chance and ordered Aragog to lunge toward Harry. The engorgement charm had briefly undone the size reduction used in the competition. Matthew and Cedric had also used spells to enlarge themselves, joining Harry to confront Aragog. Even so, Aragog's bulk dwarfed them. "Run, quick!" Matthew shouted. 6 members of the emergency rescue team stood between Aragog and the 3 Hogwarts champions. Because Matthew's earthquake had been targeted mainly at the spider swarm, those rescuers had escaped most of the damage and could now move. The Horcrux had Aragog chase the Hogwarts team, while it intended to deal personally with the 6 emergency crew members. "Die for me," the Horcrux hissed, waving Umbridge's wand. Avada Kedavra. The green killing curse shot toward a young rescuer standing between the Horcrux and its target. To Voldemort's surprise, the young man rolled aside and dodged the curse. "Are young people these days so skilled?" The Horcrux snarled. His eyes narrowed. Such quick reflexes were not common. He did not know the rescuer, like Umbridge, was himself being controlled. After dodging, the young man countered with fiendfire. A raging inferno burst from his wand tip and swept toward the Horcrux. A swirl of ethereal mist wrapped around Umbridge, drawing up and putting distance between the Horcrux and the fiendfire. "This is getting out of hand. Harry Potter's already gotten away. This plan may be ruined," Voldemort muttered, thinking of retreat. "Master, I just saw Harry was hurt, but from what I saw, Black and Diggory weren't. There might be Harry's blood where they were standing," Umbridge said shrewdly. The Horcrux thought it plausible. He decided to buy time with the rescuers, then quietly transfigured a small snake to check the spot where Harry had stood. A moment later, the little snake reported back. There was a pool of blood where Harry had been. The snake slurped the blood into its belly, dove into the earth, and vanished. With the blood secured, Horcrux Voldemort activated a teleportation charm and disappeared. About 10 minutes later, the Aurors finally arrived. The Horcrux had escaped. The anonymous controller of the young rescuer, who had been operating remotely, felt disappointed. Remote manipulation was limited by the strength of the person he controlled. After the exchanges he just had, he realized he couldn't take down the Horcrux himself. He had only been able to delay it, hoping the blonde woman pinned by the spiders would free her hands and intervene. If she had, he might have had a chance to seize the Horcrux. Unfortunately, the blonde woman had slipped away before he even noticed. She was that dangerous. Still, his primary objective for the night had been achieved. He had controlled members of the emergency rescue team to alter the protective charms around the competition grounds, masking the disturbances there. That was why Dumbledore had not appeared. The incident in the Forbidden Forest had been amplified to draw Aurors away and tie them up for as long as possible to facilitate other work. Finding an active Horcrux in the forest had been an accident, and it was a pity he hadn't planned for it, or he might have harvested another Horcrux. At least he had prevented that Horcrux from snatching Harry. That was lucky. Half an hour later, a slender figure knelt outside a door and said, "Master, the item you requested has been retrieved." The woman held up a pure silver chalice. On either side rose finely wrought gold handles. The cup's body was covered with symbolic, intricate carvings. "You have done well," a cold voice answered from inside. The chalice lifted as if by invisible hands and settled onto a palm as white as porcelain. But above the wrist, blue-white scales grew. Not just the wrist, scales covered the creature's entire body. Above the neck, the skin was back to porcelain white again. The chalice, sensing the aura of its own kind, seemed to come alive. A face of ethereal mist coalesced and howled. "To think it's been resurrected." A wretched scream echoed through the room. Robards, director of the Auror office, had also arrived. The Auror department had passed the report up the chain. The disturbance in the Forbidden Forest was said to be massive and had required authorization from higher-ups to mobilize so many Aurors. Robards only led the team after consulting Minister Scrimgeour. "Is everyone all right?" Robards asked. "Robards, could you have come any later? We nearly died. You have no idea how many spiders surrounded us." A middle-aged man from the emergency team snapped. Others chimed in with equal outrage. "Yeah, I'll have nightmares for months," a young woman said, hugging herself. Her hands still trembled. "Where's the Hogwarts champion team? Are they in danger?" Robards interrupted, anxious. The terrain here was badly torn up. If anything had happened to the champions, Robards knew the responsibility would fall squarely on him. He needed them to be all right. "They ran that way. They were being chased by a massive acromantula," the middle-aged man said, pointing. Robards picked 3 Aurors and told the man, "Come with us and show the way." The middle-aged man looked incredulous. "Only 3 of you?" "These 3 are the elite among the Aurors," Robards said, annoyed. "They have the most combat experience." The 3 chosen Aurors likewise shot the middle-aged man a look of disapproval. He hesitated, but, for his own safety, relented. "I don't think it's enough. The acromantula is huge. Its legs alone are 10 meters long." "What? 10-meter legs? The champions are being chased by that?" Robards felt his stomach drop. If the champions were still being pursued by Aragog. "Preserved egg, help me restrain it," Matthew shouted. After resting and taking potions, Preserved Egg had recovered half of his magical power. "Got it! Meow!" the cat answered, and produced 8 invisible hands, each clamping around one of Aragog's legs. Aragog, in full sprint, was suddenly grabbed and sent tumbling through the forest, knocking down trees as he went. Finally, he smashed into a rock face and was buried under the rubble. Matthew seized the moment. He ran to Aragog's side, clenched his fist, and struck a joint on one massive leg as hard as he could. Bang! One 10-meter leg bent inward with a sickening crunch. Aragog screamed in pain and thrashed beneath the rocks. Matthew grabbed the mangled leg and ripped. Black ichor sprayed everywhere. He tore the leg free. Aragog pushed aside the rubble and lunged at Matthew to tear him apart. At that moment, Preserved Egg's invisible hands seized the remaining legs again and tried to flip the spider. Aragog's strength soon overmatched the hands. They began to fail. Matthew didn't stop. He flashed to another leg and struck its joint twice. The joint crumpled. He pulled with all his might. Another leg came away in his hands, juices splattering. With two legs gone on one side, Aragog's base became unstable, and the invisible hands found the leverage to flip him onto his back. "Transfigure me a weapon," Matthew shouted. Cedric, quick to respond, transfigured a long spear and hurled it to Matthew. Matthew caught it, leapt onto Aragog's abdomen, and drove the spear down with all his strength. The abdomen is the most vulnerable part of a spider, even for an acromantula. The spear sank deep. Aragog writhed and kicked, but his remaining legs were pinned by Preserved Egg's hands, and he couldn't flip back over. "Quite tenacious," Matthew murmured. He took out the concentrated venom he had acquired from the tree monkey giant toad on the first day and let a single drop slip into the spear wound. The wound hissed like water on hot oil. Aragog thrashed violently. Preserved Egg strained to hold him. "Hold on! This is his death agony!" Matthew called. "No problem, meow!" Preserved Egg insisted. Sure enough, Aragog's struggles ebbed until he teetered on the edge of death. At that moment, more than a dozen aurors burst from the trees. "Here, found them. Whoa!" The arriving aurors stared, dumbfounded, at the colossal spider and the figure standing on it. A dozen audible gasps rippled through the forbidden forest. "It's black," Robard said in disbelief. "Did you kill this?" Very few acromantulas grew to such size. One this massive was rare even in the magical world, more like an acromantula king. Robards noticed Matthew wasn't even waving a wand. In other words, he had taken this beast down without magic. There was also a spear, Robards realized, but a spear against an acromantula king was hardly plausible. He wanted proof. Robards spotted a nearby recording device. The forest was dotted with cameras sponsored by Magical Age Publishing House to capture the champion's moments, and ordered the footage pulled up. A moment later, the dozen aurors who had just watched fell silent again as the recording confirmed it. Matthew Black had taken down the acromantula king without relying on wand work. What kind of monster was he? Robards didn't know what to think. He moved on. "Are you two hurt?" he asked Harry and Cedric. Harry lifted a bandaged hand. "I was injured, but Preserved Egg used one of Matthew's potions. It worked wonders, almost healed already." That line was Matthew's script. Since Umbridge was on the emergency team and he didn't want her telling others, Harry hadn't truly been injured. Matthew had coached Harry to say this, offering only that it was related to Lord Voldemort. Trusting him, Harry went along. "As long as you're all right, we'll handle the rest," Robards said. "You can continue with the competition." He glanced at the small, shadowy cat at their feet, but didn't press for explanations. That wasn't his business. Just then, two aurors approached. "Director Robards, we found some charred werewolf corpses," one of them reported. "Take me there." Robards left at once with the aurors. After Robards left with the aurors, Matthew went back to the place where he had sprinkled the specially prepared Harry's blood. From the disturbed ground and the traces left behind, it was clear that Horcrux Voldemort's agent had found the blood. The concoction had been expensive to make. It was just bait, meant to lure whatever fragment of Voldemort had been prowling into a trap. That fragment had already taken the blood and would almost certainly begin preparations for resurrection soon. Matthew hoped that when Horcrux Voldemort resurrected, he would move to collect the other Horcruxes himself. After tonight's actions, 2 of the 5 marked danger zones across the river were no longer being guarded. Aragog had rounded up the acromantulas from the spider zone. The earthquake Matthew had caused hadn't killed every spider, but it had broken their organization and driven most of the survivors off in all directions. The spider zone was effectively undefended. The werewolves who had been guarding the Wolfpack zone had been taken away by the werewolves' own contingency, leaving it unguarded as well. "The guards for the spider zone should be acromantulas," Matthew said. "There shouldn't be any now. We can go straight in and take the chest." "Yeah," Cedric said. "Other champion teams will be crossing the river tomorrow. We should grab the chest as soon as possible." Matthew didn't mention that he already knew, through the vision he'd been given, that the Wolfpack zone was unguarded. Instead, he led Cedric and Harry toward the spider zone, and when they passed the wolf pack area, they just happened to discover it was undefended. The three of them returned with two gilded treasure chests from the two danger zones. Both of the golden chests required special keys to open. Once picked up, each chest would broadcast the holder's location on the maps of the other champion teams for 1 minute every hour. The small chest they'd taken from the river earlier in the day contained a key for one of the golden chests. That small chest had its own locator. It displayed their position and had to be held for a full day before it could be opened. Over 10 hours had already passed. By dawn, they'd be able to open it. With a few hours to go before daylight, the trio found a sheltered place and set up camp to rest. Malfoy Manor. 4 bedraggled werewolves slouched back into the manor that night. Lucius Malfoy had heard noises in the courtyard and had come out, thinking an intruder had arrived. He was astonished to see Fenrir Greyback rather than an enemy. Greyback had only left that evening. "Greyback, why are you back?" Lucius demanded. "Weren't you out on a mission for the Master?" Fenrir Greyback stood silent for a moment, then said flatly, "We failed." "What?" Lucius blinked. "You failed already?" Not long ago, the werewolves had been foraging for scraps in Malfoy Manor and had set off with swagger, swearing they'd complete their task. Now, after only a couple of hours, they had come back empty-handed. Some other Death Eaters, drawn by the commotion, came out to see what had happened. They were as baffled as Lucius. "Greyback, didn't you take a mission from the Master?" one asked. "We must inform the Master." Greyback's face darkened. He didn't want to speak to them. His expression was already blackened by the forest fires that had scorched him, but he refused to be bullied. Lucius sneered at his silence. "Then you'd better think how to survive the Master's wrath." "That's not your concern," Greyback muttered. He gathered the remaining werewolves and stalked away toward the hills behind the manor. Voldemort himself was not in the house. Malfoy was not the most trusted of his servants, and Lucius did not permit him that access. Outside, Greyback called for Bellatrix Lestrange and asked her to take him to the Master. The place where Voldemort now dwelt was protected by a Fidelius charm. Only Bellatrix could bring others inside. When she arrived, she looked the werewolves over with open contempt. "Greyback, you're useless," Bellatrix spat. "The enemy was strong," Greyback said heavily. "Even if we'd planned better," Bellatrix tossed him a small vial. "Drink the antidote before we go in." The vial contained the antidote to Polyjuice Potion. Since discovering there had been a mole the last time the Master met with his servants, Bellatrix had become paranoid. Everyone to be shown to Voldemort had to have their identity verified. Greyback drank without hesitation and told the others to wait outside. Once inside, the two approached the Master, an ugly, shriveled infant of a man. Greyback prostrated himself and said, "Master, I failed. We encountered a very strong enemy." The childlike Voldemort rasped, "Fenrir, let me see your memories." The Master's weakened body tempered his cruelty that night. In another age, he might have punished Greyback first and asked questions later. Fenrir nodded and produced a small memory extraction device. He touched it to his temple and slowly pulled it away. A silver thread, a strand of memory, followed the motion and was drawn free. Matthew had expected this. When he had used Oriana to control Fenrir and the other 3 werewolves, he had tampered with their memories. The crucial segment, where Oriana had acted, was missing. In its place, the memory showed them leaving the Forbidden Forest by means of a portkey-like charm after Matthew had cut down 2 of their number. Bellatrix produced a memory basin, a pensieve-like device, and placed the silver thread inside for the Master to view. Voldemort watched the memory, then said, "Bellatrix, you look at this too. Tell me who the wizard in the air is." He had no clear idea. There were not many wizards who fought in the air. The one in Greyback's memory moved with a speed and style that were not common, and the wings the opponent used looked unlike anything Voldemort had seen before. Bellatrix examined the recording. Her face changed. "Master," she said, "I've seen those wings before, on Matthew Black. When he put down the riot at the Quidditch World Cup, he used that kind of whirlwind-conjured wings to float in the sky. I remember seeing a photograph in the paper." She watched the memory again. "But these wings are smaller than the ones Matthew used that day." "Get the other werewolves' memories," Voldemort ordered. Bellatrix returned with 3 more memory threads from the others and set them into the basin. She compared them carefully and found a clue. "Master," she said, "one memory shows a closer view of the opponent. The enemy doesn't look human. The eyes look animal. The wings here are indeed smaller than Matthew's. And in 2 of the memories, you can hear a cat mewing." "Matthew Black has a cat," Bellatrix continued. "The enemy Greyback and the others met is very likely Matthew Black's cat." Voldemort frowned. "You mean they were beaten by a cat?" He watched the memories again and sank into a silence of his own. A helpless sense of time passing faster than he could manage rose in him. Fenrir Greyback had once been one of his more fearsome servants. Now his best warriors had been scattered and humiliated by a student's magical pet. Even if the cat's wings gave it an advantage, from what he had seen, it was a dangerous magical creature by itself. How does Black's cat know that kind of magic? Voldemort wondered. He knew of no feline species that could command such effects. Bellatrix spoke up. "Could this be runic magic?" she suggested. "Perhaps pets can learn runic spells." Bellatrix kept a close eye on Matthew Black. She had personally killed members of his family and expected retribution. Runic magic, Voldemort mused. News of runic magic had been everywhere in the papers lately. If Matthew's cat could use rune-based spells, it stood to reason his Nagini might be trained to do so as well. He would have to test that at some point. If they wanted Harry Potter's blood, then, given the current situation, Voldemort would have to rely on Barty and young Malfoy's attempts. Because of the circumstances, Voldemort let Fenrir Greyback live. Bellatrix was permitted to administer a show of punishment, a quick but controlled cruciatus. Then, Greyback was dismissed. Unbeknownst to them, the werewolf who had lain his memories before Lord Voldemort had been manipulated by Matthew. An informant close to the Master had been planted. The next day, the newspapers carried a different shock. A Gringotts vault had been robbed, and the photograph showed the Lestrange family vault utterly ransacked, empty of even a single galleon. Worse, Voldemort's cup Horcrux had been kept there. "Bellatrix," Voldemort screamed. "Master, please, believe me. I haven't betrayed you." Bellatrix knelt, frantic. "Then why was the Lestrange vault emptied?" he roared. "My curses are not easy to break. Anyone who touches that cup should trigger its defenses, duplicate it into many pieces. For the Lestrange vault to be entirely emptied, the thief was prepared." Voldemort's mind snapped back to the intruder he'd glimpsed in Fenrir Greyback's memory, the person who had exposed the werewolves in the first place. That figure, there was something familiar about the way he cast spells. "Only a handful of people know where the cup was hidden," Voldemort muttered. "Someone able to break the cup's protections in so short a time." A terrible possibility moved through him. A Horcrux had acted without his knowledge. One of his pieces of soul was on its own campaign against the others. Has he resurrected? Unease flooded him. If Horcrux Voldemort had found a way to act autonomously and was already moving, Voldemort's own incomplete return would be a dangerous vulnerability. If he himself were fully restored, he would have ways to locate the remaining Horcruxes. But he was not, and time was slipping. "Bellatrix," he said, cold and immediate, "there is no more time to waste. Bring me Harry Potter's blood, now." "As you command, Master," Bellatrix whispered, lowered herself to the floor, and bowed before him. 326, Warthog. The next day, the crowd outside the Forbidden Forest was buzzing. Commentator Lee Jordan cried, "It seems something incredible has happened." "Everyone, take a look at the current score standings. Durmstrang, 300 points. Hogwarts, 220 points. Durmstrang, 120 points. 110 points. Ilvermorny, 100 points. Mahokoro, 90 points. Castello Bruxo, 90 points. Uagadou, 0 points. Uagadou's score has been completely wiped out. According to the director's message, near dawn, the Durmstrang champion team used a locating device and attacked the Uagadou team while they were still asleep. The Durmstrang team ransacked Uagadou's score badges and item rewards. As a result, Uagadou, which had been in second place, has fallen straight to the bottom, and Durmstrang's score even surpassed Hogwarts. They jumped into first place. However, this lead is only temporary. The director has just sent another message. The Hogwarts team obtained 2 golden chests last night. You may have heard about the intrusion in the Forbidden Forest last night. These 2 golden chests are the reward for the Hogwarts team resolving that crisis. I can reveal now that each golden chest contains a 100-point badge. If Hogwarts keeps both chests, they'll gain 200 points and retake first place. The pressure's back on Durmstrang. I'm eager to see if they'll continue attacking other teams. From now on, every team should be on their guard. The tournament committee had wanted to suppress news of the invasion, but several newspapers had already obtained video footage through various channels. Early in the morning, the major papers exposed the incident, and the Department of Magical Games and Sports was flooded with complaints. The committee had no choice but to publicly promise increased security around the venue. Professor Karkaroff looked at Dumbledore with a sour expression. "What a coincidence," he said. "The intruders just happened to run into the Hogwarts team, and then Hogwarts got rewarded for solving the problem." The other principals stayed silent, but their looks said they were suspicious too. Dumbledore, however, remained calm. He knew someone had tampered with the protective charms in the Forbidden Forest, which was why he hadn't noticed the activity until Ministry representatives arrived. Matthew had been reliable. He dealt with the intrusion without even appearing that night, and Harry had come to no harm. Since Matthew's return, many of Dumbledore's worries had diminished. A dependable young man has finally appeared. Perhaps it's almost time for me to retire, he thought. Fontana was perceptive to invite Matthew to teach at Ilvermorny even before he graduated. Dumbledore watched the footage and recognized Matthew's magical familiar as the one who stopped the werewolves. The potential of runic magic is no lower than the existing magical systems, he mused, wondering whether Hogwarts should consider offering a runic magic course. Lee Jordan continued, "Next, please enjoy the highlight reel sent over by the directors." The giant screen began to play the clip of Matthew defeating Aragog. The crowd screamed as Aragog filled the screen. "That spider is huge. I'm getting goosebumps. Oh my God, those eyes. I'm never sleeping again." Lee Jordan exclaimed, "Ah, that acromantula is enormous. This is not a trick of perspective. Remember, the champions have used the enlargement charm to restore their size temporarily." According to the tournament committee's verification, this acromantula's legs were about 10 meters long when fully extended. Most people will never see an acromantula this big in their lives. Yet this giant was helpless against Matthew Black, Lee continued. Matthew Black defeated this acromantula with unparalleled strength. He once again used his formidable power to resolve the crisis for the Hogwarts team. The screen then showed Matthew facing the werewolf pack. Lee Jordan went on, "Matthew Black's maneuver exceeded the tournament committee's expectations. The web retractor was originally designed to help the shrunken champions travel quickly. No one imagined Matthew could use the web retractor so fluidly. Under his control, the retractable webbing became a sharp tool for rapid aerial movement. He used his extreme mobility to outmaneuver the intruders." Exchange students in the crowd stared in awe. They had heard stories about Matthew Black during their time at Hogwarts, but seeing him act in real time reshaped those tales into reality. Since the Triwizard Tournament began, Matthew's performances had repeatedly overturned assumptions. Some exchange students worried for their own champions. The Ilvermorny students, especially, had given up hope for their team and were instead excited about the possibility of taking a course with Matthew. Matthew, Cedric, and Harry noticed the score changes on the map. Harry yawned, then snapped awake when he saw the numbers. "Durmstrang attacked Ouagadou?" "It appears so." Matthew nodded. He'd already seen the outcome through the eyes he'd placed in the forest. He hadn't interfered. No matter how the teams fought, he planned to take the rewards in the end. "There are 5 dangerous zones in total. Yesterday we took the golden chests from the wolf and spider zones. 3 remain: warthog, snake, and troll. Let's try to get those 3 chests today," he suggested. Cedric and Harry readily agreed, and the 3 headed for the nearest chest, the warthog zone. "Where's the warthog?" Harry looked around. The area seemed relatively open, with few trees for cover. It should have posed a threat on the level of the acromantula or the wolf pack. "Our chest can be opened now," Matthew said, noticing the small chest they'd had to carry for a day. Its locking enchantment had dissipated. Inside was a small gem that fit perfectly into the groove on the lock of the golden chest. They had tried Alahomora earlier, but the golden chests resisted that charm. With the gem in place, the lock sprang open. "We gained 100 points," Harry said, elated. Hogwarts jumped to 320 points and retook first place over Durmstrang. Inside the chest were spells and items. "There's Fiendfire," Cedric said in surprise. "This chest is generous." They also found a device resembling an electric net, useful for subduing powerful magical creatures. It could even restrain a dragon for a time. "This net should be very useful," Harry said. Suddenly, the ground shuddered. Gravel rattled. "Is it another earthquake?" Cedric blurted, remembering the tremor from the day before. All three felt a sense of doom, but they were fortunate to remain unharmed. Matthew's gaze darted to the right and his eyes narrowed. "It's not an earthquake. A gigantic, invisible creature is charging toward us." He sensed a massive magical creature coming at them. From the observer's eye, nothing appeared, an invisible enemy. "Get out of the way," Matthew shouted. After the past few days' trials, Cedric and Harry's instincts were sharp. They dodged. A massive, unseen object thundered past, a blast of wind like the wake of a speeding train. Harry, the lightest, nearly fell but recovered. "It's invisible. I'll try to use the revealing powder," Cedric called. He had taken the revealing powder from a chest 2 days before and had it ready. The three had divided roles. Cedric and Harry provided support while Matthew took the lead offensively, so they carried auxiliary items. The invisible creature barreled from the open field and crashed into the trees with a boom. A huge tree trunk, thick enough for 2 people to hug, splintered. The creature adjusted and charged again. Though invisible, its passage stirred up gravel and dust. Cedric seized the chance. While dodging, he scattered the silver, revealing powder into the air. As the creature ran through it, the powder clung to it, and the animal was revealed. A light gray warthog, enormous and solidly built. Its broad head, tough, rough hide, and fleshy warts covering its face and body made excellent natural armor. Its hair was short and sparse, limbs short and thick, and its hooves like iron. "It's a T-bow warthog," Matthew said. He'd suspected as much and now confirmed it. "T-bow warthog," Harry shouted, then immediately cast an explosive charm. "Bombarda!" The explosion left only a white mark on the T-bow warthog. Its hide didn't even flinch. "How are we supposed to fight this?" Harry widened his eyes. "The T-bow warthog is extremely dangerous," Matthew explained. "It doesn't use complex spells or poison, but it can turn invisible, and its hide is so tough that wizards use it to make shields and protective items. It has very strong magical resistance." The warthog shook off the silver powder and vanished again. Hooves pounded as it charged into them once more. Cedric waved his wand and cast a spell at the creature's path. The ground turned slick and greasy. The T-bow warthog slipped, lost balance, and tumbled like a bulldozer, crashing through the woods and knocking down trees. It was unharmed and furious, roaring as it righted itself and charged again. By now the three were used to its pattern and easily dodged. Harry imitated Cedric, casting a slipping spell on its path, but it caused no real harm. "This hide is way too thick," Harry complained. "I'll try," Matthew said. He waved his wand and unleashed Fiendfire. Golden flames erupted, forming a great serpent of fire that lunged toward the T-bow warthog. The creature dodged and charged away, but Matthew had grown adept with Fiendfire. The golden blaze obeyed him. The fiery serpent shifted, becoming a golden rock that flew faster than the warthog and struck it. Sparse fur ignited instantly, and the golden flames, corrosive as poison, began to spread across the warthog's body. "Does the Hogwarts team have a way to deal with a fever-wart hog?" Lee Jordan asked, voice crackling with excitement from the commentary stand. "As everyone knows, the hide of a fever-wart hog is extremely tough. Wizards often use it to make shields and protective clothing," another voice added. "Ordinary spells would have a hard time getting through that hide. But the Hogwarts champions keep rewriting our expectations. They're a combination that breaks conventions. I bet they'll find a way." "Is Matthew Black trying to use Fiendfire to subdue the fever-wart hog? That might not work. Fiendfire is notoriously hard to control, and the fever-wart hog runs far faster than Fiendfire spreads." "What? The Fiendfire Matthew is controlling has actually transformed. Can Fiendfire be transformed? I'm embarrassed to admit I don't know. That fiendfire has become a giant golden rock. It's flying faster now and closing on the feverwort hog. The fiendfire has wrapped around the hog and spread across its body. The fiendfire has fully ignited the feverwort hog. The hog's hide is thick, and it's still resisting fiercely. It smashed down countless trees and held out for a long time under the fiendfire, but flesh and blood cannot withstand fiendfire's incineration. The thick-skinned feverwort hog has fallen. The Hogwarts champion team will get another golden treasure chest. When the beast finally fell, Matthew dispersed the still-burning fiendfire. That thing really was thick-skinned, carrying fiendfire while running that long, Cedric said, eyes wide. And your fiendfire transfiguration is incredible. It's a small trick for controlling fiendfire, Matthew said quietly. You need a fair amount of research into both transfiguration and fiendfire to pull it off. The gap between us keeps getting wider. How did our year end up with someone like you? Even if we try to catch up, it's hard to see your back, Cedric said with a rueful smile. Harry felt unusually calm. She hadn't known Matthew as long as Cedric had, but she'd seen him demonstrate his strength many times. She had long since given up comparing herself to him. He was simply a genius beyond ordinary measures. The golden treasure chest lay inside the feverwort hog's lair. While the hog was alive, a protective ward barred the entrance. Only the hog could pass. When it died, the ward deactivated, and the three of them stepped inside to claim the chest. The key to a golden treasure chest appears in a random ordinary chest. Once a team picks it up, their position shows on the map. Matthew checked the map and saw another champion team already had the key. We need a key to open it, he said. The other 2 treasure points are a bit far, and several teams have already crossed the river. Let's clear out the teams nearby first. Should we go after Castello Bruxo? I just saw a key over by them, and they aren't far, Cedric suggested. They've crossed the river too, so let them be, Matthew said. The map occasionally revealed the positions of teams carrying keys, but the little eyes Matthew had placed allowed him to see more. The Castello Bruxo champions were actually lingering with the Ilvermorny champions. After Durmstrang moved against Ouagadougou, the sense of crisis spread. No team wanted their points wiped out early. When Castello Bruxo met Ilvermorny, they formed a temporary alliance. Cedric used a tracking device so Castello Bruxo's location would show briefly. By the time the 3 of them arrived, Castello Bruxo had already left. This item isn't very good. Display only lasted a short while. How can we catch up? Harry complained. Let's look around. They might still be nearby, Matthew suggested. Lee Jordan, narrating from the stand, perked up. It seems the Hogwarts team is making a move on another team. The Castello Bruxo champions got the key, and their location flickered on the map. But they've allied with Ilvermorny, and the Hogwarts champions probably don't know that yet. I'm curious, can they beat a 2-school alliance? A moment later, Jordan sighed. What a pity. The Hogwarts champions couldn't pin down Castello Bruxo's position. They'd already left. Such a shame. At their closest, they were only a few hundred meters apart and missed each other. Wait, the Hogwarts team has changed direction. Castello Bruxo and Ilvermorny won't be able to dodge them. Looks like they're about to meet. In the guest stands, Principal Fontana's face darkened. It looked like Ilvermorny's points were about to be cleared. The director of Castello Bruxo felt the same dread. After watching clips of Matthew's actual combat, he knew his students stood little chance. By contrast, the principal of Ouagadougou allowed himself a small, knowing smile. It's not so bad to have your points cleared early. You might earn some back later, he said lightly. After Ouagadou's points had been wiped, that team had managed to capture a treasure point and was no longer at 0. They had 10 points. Fontana couldn't help but begin hoping Matthew would clear other schools' points as well. It would be like a second ranking. Maybe Ilvermorny could climb to a respectable middle position. After all, Ilvermorny was the youngest school here and had been unlucky with a swampy starting terrain that had kept their score low. Matthew led Cedric and Harry straight into the Castello Bruxo Ilvermorny pair. The blonde siblings Matthew had seen earlier were among them. We still couldn't escape. These points are probably lost, the blonde boy muttered. When Cedric used the tracking item, the position party received a notification, and on receiving it, they fled. They ran as far as they could, but Matthew still caught them. You took the key, and we took the chest. We had to come find you, Matthew said with a smile. Professor Black, if we hand over the key, will you let us go? The blonde girl asked. No. Since we've met, there's no letting it go. Matthew shrugged. If we all attack at once, he might not be able to take us. A Castellabruxo champion declared, wearing a feathered headdress. The blonde girl had only asked to stall, then she seized the chance and fired. A red spell shot toward Matthew. Her speed and aim were both excellent. Against ordinary combatants, they might have disarmed him before he had time to react. Matthew was no ordinary combatant. Magic condensed at the tip of his wand, and with a single forward flick, he executed a precise counter, flicking the spell aside as if swatting at a fly. It was a high-level dueling technique that only worked when there was a clear disparity in skill. The Ilvermorny and Castellabruxo champions stared, stunned. Few of their duelists possessed such nuance. Everyone attack at once, then he won't be able to counter everything. And his spell supply is limited, the feathered champion shouted, beginning a flamboyant, exaggerated step. Champions from different schools used different forms of conjuration and summoning. Castellabruxo's had a distinctly regional flavor. A red glowing eagle sprang up behind him and dove toward Matthew. Simultaneously, other champions released a mammoth and a lion aimed at Cedric and Harry. The blonde siblings and an Ilvermorny champion cast Opugno together. In an instant, dozens of golden birds were propelled like missiles toward Matthew. Matthew smiled faintly. His wand did have a finite number of spells loaded, but for someone whose specialty was transfiguration, that limit wasn't the problem they thought it was. He turned his wand, and the ground began to melt. Gravel, soil, and grass compressed and flowed together like liquid. A massive tornado of mud and water shot up around Matthew, twisting and thrashing. The golden birds were sucked into the vortex and vanished. The Castellabruxo champion yanked his red eagle upward, trying to escape into the sky, but the mud and water spiral leapt higher, like a python striking, and submerged the eagle. It thrashed at the edge, trying to break free, but was hauled in and shredded almost instantly by the violent force. "Oh no!" the Castellabruxo champion cried. The tornado needed almost no time to destroy the eagle. It whirled toward the nearby champions. The feathered champion retreated, his wand throwing off magical light that clung to his body, something like a hastening charm. He ran as though his feet had been greased. The two other Castellabruxo champions did the same, sprinting for distance. Three champions who were slower hadn't gotten far enough. The mud tornado surged up into the sky, broke into a rain of droplets, and then those drops fell. Where the mud hit, it hardened like cement into stone. The three Castellabruxo champions were frozen where they stood, their bodies encased, only their mud-smeared faces visible, like statues of shocked and terrified stone. The same thing happened to the Ilvermorny champions who had just drawn broomsticks. They, too, were pinned to the earth, transformed into stone figures clutching brooms. "This is transfiguration?" the witnesses breathed, stunned, staring at their friends turned to stone. From the commentary booth, Lee Jordan bellowed hoarsely, "Brilliant transfiguration. Spectators, those tickets were worth every galleon. Matthew Black has shown us the pinnacle of transfiguration. Marvelous, truly marvelous. In one brief display, Matthew cast transfiguration once and produced multiple stage transformations. First, that mud tornado rising from the ground. Just watching it, you can feel the crushing pressure. Look at the horror on the champions' faces. You can imagine how desperate they must have been. But it didn't stop there. After the tornado rose, he altered it again into mud rain, which then became stone and fixed them in place. What control! Matthew Black's transfiguration is like an extension of his own fingers. He controls it at will. I dare say his transfiguration may even rival Professor McGonagall's. Perhaps we should just let Matthew take over." Lee suddenly caught himself at the glare he sensed and hurriedly changed tack. "Ahem. Congratulations to the Hogwarts team for taking the points of 2 teams. That brings Hogwarts to 520 points, far ahead of second-place Durmstrang and third-place Mahudakoro." He added, as a matter-of-fact aside, "Also, the director asked me to mention that Mahudakoro ambushed Beauxbatons earlier and successfully took their points. We'll show a replay of that next." Dumbledore, watching the replay of Matthew's transfiguration, smiled with a light in his eyes. Matthew, he thought, You are extraordinary. What took me decades to refine, you have accomplished at this age. Turning soil into a mud tornado was one thing. Making it rain and then solidifying that rain into stone were each achievable. To stack all of those effects together in quick succession, with such precision and control, that was rare. Dumbledore had thought Matthew's transfiguration still needed polish. Now he realized the boy might already be his equal. After Matthew and the others defeated the Castello Bruxo and Ilvermorny champions, they searched the Castello Bruxo student and found a small key chest. This key chest will be ready to open in less than an hour. Why don't we go grab the chest in the nearby marked area? Cedric suggested. Matthew nodded. He checked through the eyes he'd set up and saw the remaining teams were all spread far apart, so it made sense to go for the nearby marked chest. Besides, the Durmstrang team was still around the snake area. Their champions were likely to help retrieve that chest anyway. The three of them mounted the broomsticks they'd taken from Ilvermorny and flew toward the marked spot. They arrived quickly. Standing there was a strange iron sentinel, completely encased in thick plate armor and wielding a massive iron hammer. It had been sleeping, but the sentry's armor sparked and an electric current jolted through it as the three approached, waking it instantly. It exploded into rage and lifted the hammer. "There's something strange under the ground," Matthew murmured, noticing magical fluctuations beneath the surface. "Split up, quickly." Even with Matthew's strength, he couldn't risk taking a direct hit from that hammer. The three urged their brooms apart and scattered. The sentinel brought its hammer down with a thunderous boom. The impact splintered the ground in all directions, and rock fragments flew everywhere. Matthew, Cedric, and Harry threaded their broomsticks through the debris. Even so, many of the fragments were huge. The sentinel's armor protected it from the rubble, so simply knocking at its plates wouldn't work. Matthew pulled up to a higher altitude, where the falling rocks couldn't reach. Cedric flew up beside him. "We can't get close with those rocks. This must be a programmed attack. The ground keeps producing rocks for it to smash. This thing's trained. What we need to deal with isn't its hammer, it's all those flying stones," Cedric observed. "Look, the chest is embedded in its helmet," Harry said, pointing at a groove on the sentinel's head where a small chest sat. "If we try to fly straight in, the rocks will shred us," Matthew said. He moved his wand. The stretch of ground beneath the sentinel bulged and heaved, surging upward like a living thing. The earth shoved the sentinel high into the air. A moment later, the ground snapped back, and the sentinel lost its footing. Without solid support, it fell. The impact knocked it senseless despite its armor. Matthew urged his broom forward, floated above the sentinel's head, and calmly lifted the chest from the helmet. At the commentary booth, Lee Jordan's voice rang out in excitement. "Congratulations to the Hogwarts team for securing another golden chest. That's 4 out of 5 golden chests. Let me let you in on a little secret. Once all 5 golden chests are opened, the match ends early," another commentator added. "The Mahutakoro champions' methods might be questionable, but they're effective," Lee continued. "They even ambushed and took down Durmstrang. They're lucky to have such a useful item. Let's see if it works against the Hogwarts team. I'm curious how Hogwarts will respond." By that point, the final 3 key chests had appeared across the grounds. One had been obtained by Matthew and his team, the others were in Durmstrang's possession. Harry and Cedric stared at the scoreboard on Matthew's map in disbelief. The Mahutakoro team's score was suddenly surging. If it weren't for the golden chests, Mahutakoro would have overtaken them. "Mahutakoro actually beat Durmstrang?" Harry said. 2 days ago, Mahutakoro had been near the bottom. Now they'd defeated Beauxbatons and Durmstrang and climbed to second place. That left only a few teams whose points hadn't been reset. Matthew continued to watch through his network of eyes. Once Durmstrang recovered the chest in the snake area, Matthew led Harry and Cedric to an accidental encounter with the Durmstrang champions. One of the Durmstrang boys cursed, "I told you we shouldn't have taken the chest. It would expose our position." Another Durmstrang champion drew his wand. "There are a lot of people watching. Fight!" The other teams had noticed Hogwarts picking up other teams' points on the map, so even teams who hadn't directly fought them knew better than to underestimate them. The Durmstrang trio coordinated well, firing 3 spells almost at once, 2 at Matthew and 1 at Cedric. They had no reason to see Harry as a threat and focused on the older two instead. Matthew dodged one curse and, seizing an opening, flicked his wand to reflect a spell back faster than it had been cast. The returning curse hit one Durmstrang champion so quickly he had no time to react. He was blasted away and fell unconscious. Cedric threw up a shield charm and blocked the spell aimed at him. Unnoticed, Harry slipped in a quick stoop-fi and knocked down another opponent who hadn't defended in time. The remaining Durmstrang champion watched helplessly as his teammates fell, and then he was frozen in place by another of Matthew's spells. Matthew stepped forward and took the golden chest that the Durmstrang team had barely clutched. With those points consumed, Hogwarts' total jumped to 780, well ahead of the second-place team's 560. The only teams whose points haven't been reset, besides us, are the Mahudakoro champions, Matthew said with a smile. Time to go meet them. Matthew had already watched through his spy network how Mahutakoro had been stealing points. They possessed an item that disguised them as a chest and even had that disguised chest marked on the map. When other champions tried to open it, the Mahutakoro students sprang out and ambushed them. They had succeeded twice with this trick, grabbing points from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. Inside the chest, the 3 Mahutakoro champions fit snugly. The interior was larger than it appeared. They could look out, but no one could see in. They'd also briefly domesticated a few billywigs to serve as chest guards. The 3 sat in stifled silence, hardly daring to breathe. The Hogwarts trio was nearby. At the booth, Lee Jordan said, "The Mahutakoro team has successfully ambushed 2 teams using that chest item. Will Hogwarts fall for it?" Back at the chest, a man with a pompadour, Gui Yancheng, their captain, whispered, "The Hogwarts team has left the area. Should we come out?" "No," he decided. "Our cloaking keeps our location hidden. Even if they use tracking items, they won't find us. Everyone else's scores have been reset. No one can catch us. As long as we stay hidden, we'll hold second place." One teammate complained, "It's so cramped in here. If I have to stay like this, I'll sleep for a week afterward." A gentle voice came from above. "If you're sleepy, I can help you." The 3 inside were stunned. Their chest had been opened, and they hadn't even gotten the chance to strike. Before they could act, Guiyancheng was struck by 2 spells and collapsed. "Captain," one teammate gasped. "A disillusionment charm." Seeing their leader down, the second teammate fumbled with a bag of hidden resources. "We surrender. These are all our resources." "Surrender? Then lie down." Matthew waved his wand and stunned both of them. The Mahutokoro champions had been sly enough to hide a stash for a comeback. Because of that deception, Matthew left them asleep inside their own chest until the match ended. Their hidden resources no longer mattered. The Hogwarts team's score was already insurmountable. Lee Jordan crowed, "The Hogwarts team has dealt with Mahutakoro cleanly and efficiently. It proves that a bit of trickery won't stand up to overwhelming strength." The leaderboard's been updated. He read the standings. Hogwarts, 140 points. Ouagadougou, 20 points. Ilvermorny, 10 points. Castellabruxo, 10 points. Beauxbatons, 10 points. Durmstrang, 0 points. Mahutakoro, 0 points. All the golden chests and their keys are now in Hogwarts' possession. No other team can overtake them. Hogwarts wins with an absolute advantage. "What a gap!" the commentators exclaimed. "This might be the most lopsided tournament in history." The next day, all the key chests were opened. Matthew and his teammates used the keys to unlock the 5 golden chests. When all 5 were opened, a blinding ring of light appeared beside every team. Passing through the light portal would restore their size and allow them to leave the competition grounds. With the portals active, the match ended early and the scores were finalized. No further point changes would affect the standings. Champions stepped through the light in turn. Mr. Bagman, head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, paused at the finish and announced, "And congratulations to the Hogwarts team for winning this tournament with a staggering lead of 1,340 points." From the stands, a thunderous cheer roared. "Hogwarts for the win." 329, Gaunt Ring. The venue buzzed with noise as every spectator shouted the names of the teams they supported. The champions gathered on the stage, waiting for the tournament committee to announce the next arrangements. We're not very used to using 62S, so we were the first to be defeated by the Durmstrang team. We thought we were going to be at the bottom, Isis said with a light laugh. Thanks to you, all their points were cleared. Luck is part of one's strength, Matthew said with a smile. And after resources are taken, it's not easy to get treasure chests again. You must have worked hard too, right? Yeah, it's really difficult without 60 in items, Isis nodded. We could only use the terrain as traps to defeat the 24s. But you're just incredible. You can take down a tree monkey giant toad with a 38. That's a 4x level dangerous creature. Isis pointed at some replay clips running on the screen. Fleur Delacour, curious, asked, Matthew, did you pick up some special item? After Matthew had treated Fleur the previous time, she and her sister had come to thank him that evening, and the two had become somewhat acquainted. Matthew didn't use any items then. He relied entirely on his agility, Harry said. It's truly incredible. Your physical skills are so good. I've heard many ancient 56 were skilled in swordsmanship, and now I've finally seen a 56 like you, Fleur said admiringly. For spectators outside the venue, the Wizarding newspaper was the only way to watch the live broadcast of the Triwizard Tournament. Sales of the Wizarding newspaper soared across the globe. Many F6 who hadn't subscribed before bought it to follow the tournament, and demand for the overseas edition spiked. In the magical communities of the 8 participating regions, almost everyone had a copy. Magical Age Publishing House had become a multinational enterprise. Mr. Bagman, head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, announced, according to the current rankings on the leaderboard, the schools in the top 3 are Hogwarts, Ouagadougou, and Ilvermorny. Now, please enjoy the highlights of our champions. On the screen, close-ups of the champions' highlights played. Matthew had the most shots. This competition had become his personal show. After the montage, Mr. Bagman continued, Now we invite our 8 guests to score the champions. The scoring range is between 1 and 10 points. 5 points and above is a pass. 8 points and above denotes an outstanding performance. Guests, please score based on the champions' performances. The final score will be the average of the guests' scores. The Hogwarts team, this round's first-place finishers, were scored first. The 53s of the 8 60 schools would each give 3 scores, corresponding to the 3 champions. Given Matthew's terrifying performance, some 53s hesitated to give him anything but high marks, even if they resented Hogwarts for knocking down their own teams. They knew a single low score wouldn't matter much against such a standout performance. Principal Fontana glanced at the other 53s, their expressions mixed, and smiled slightly. There's no need to overthink this. With a wave of his hand, he gave Matthew, Cedric, and Harry scores of 10, 8, 8. He was in a good mood. Since the scores of the other top-ranked teams had been cleared, Ilvermorny, originally mid to low, suddenly had a chance to climb. The principal of Ouagadougou, grateful to Hogwarts for clearing the high-scoring teams, wanted to reward that turn of fortune, and likewise gave Matthew, Cedric, and Harry 10, 8, and 8. Professor Karkaroff of Durmstrang had different motives. He awarded the 3 Hogwarts champions 10, 5, and 5. Matthew Black's performance was wonderful, but the other 2 champions were a bit mediocre. They didn't have many highlights in this task, he said, winking at several other 53, an obvious signal to mirror his scores. Matthew's score was untouchable, but lowering Cedric and Harry would help Karkaroff's allies in the rankings. The other 53s quickly caught on. Principal Smirnov of Durmstrang, knowing Matthew personally, didn't want to offend his friend and gave 10, 8, and 8. Ms. Kiyomi of Mahutakoro, following Karkaroff's lead, gave 10, 5, and 5. The principal of Castello Bruxo did the same. Madame Maxime of Beaubatons felt 5 was too low and gave 10, 7, and 7. Cedric and Harry worked very hard. They cooperated well with Matthew, Dumbledore said with a smile, and awarded 10, 8, and 8. When the averages were first tallied, Matthew's score stood at a perfect 10, while Cedric and Harry appeared to be sitting at 6. Karkaroff's maneuvering had sown discord, and the scoring for other champions grew chaotic. The Ouagadougou champions reached second place entirely by luck. I think 4 points is appropriate, Karkaroff declared. Ouagadougou is ranked second. If second place gets only 4 points, then I can only give Beauxbatons 1 point at the bottom, the principal of Ouagadougou countered. Ilvermorny is third, and you only gave them 3 points? Someone objected. Aren't you the same? Durmstrang did poorly because they were ambushed. They can't possibly be worth only 3 points. Mr. Bagman looked toward the tumultuous guest seats and wiped sweat from his brow. He hadn't expected these 53s to be so shameless in pursuit of better rankings. Holding a combined tournament of so many schools for the first time carried some growing pains. Fortunately, the scores hadn't yet been announced. After an emergency discussion, the tournament committee issued a new rule. Any score differing by 3 or more points from the average would be discarded, and the average recalculated. With the 53s calmed, the remaining scores were more objective. Matthew's score remained a perfect 10. Cedric's and Harry's rose by 1 point each to 7. The judges also tended to award higher marks, 6 to 8, to one standout champion from each team. Mr. Bagman announced the final scores, and the individual leaderboard appeared on the screen. Matthew Black's name took the top spot. Congratulations to Matthew Black. He has taken first place on the individual leaderboard for this round. If he keeps this up, he could win the Champions Gold Cup. Matthew saw employees from Times Publishing House approaching with camera equipment for close-ups. He smiled and waved. Soon his actions were synchronized on the big screen and across the wizarding newspaper. A wave of enthusiastic screams erupted from the stands. Applause and cheers drowned out other sounds as the crowd shouted Matthew's name. For a moment, he became the 56 admired by all the young F6. Because many schools participated in this Triwizard tournament, an individual award, the Champions Gold Cup, had been established in addition to team awards. Only the most outstanding champion could win it. After the cheers subsided, Mr. Bagman continued, "Now I will announce the information for the second task. The second task will be related to Quidditch. However, this will be a Quidditch match like no other. 8 teams will participate in this Quidditch match simultaneously. A special reminder, every champion will have to perform the roles of chaser, seeker, beater, and keeper, all at the same time. Your only teammates will be the champions from your own school. This task will test the champion's abilities in many areas. Quidditch skills are only one part of it. The competition will take place after Christmas. Champions, hurry and practice to strengthen your teamwork and coordination." Little Hangleton, the gaunt shack. Left untended, it had become completely dilapidated. The weeds in the yard grew taller than a person. With a ripple in space, 2 figures appeared in the yard, Bellatrix Lestrange and the werewolf, Fenrir Greyback. They had come on their master's orders. Without lingering, they walked toward the back of the manor. Fenrir pushed open the door and stepped out. "It's right behind the manor, isn't it? I've been to that graveyard before." Bellatrix asked casually, "What were you doing at the Gaunt family graveyard?" "To pee there," Fenrir grinned. "Of course, I didn't go inside to pee." Bellatrix dismissed his nonsense and walked on. "Bellatrix, what did the master send us here for?" Fenrir asked. He wasn't chatting idly. After being placed under Matthew's Imperius, he had to report Voldemort's and the Death Eater's movements to Matthew frequently. "You'll know in a moment," Bellatrix replied. They reached the Gaunt family burial ground not far from the manor. Bellatrix searched until she found a particular grave. "Fenrir, dig it up, but don't damage anything," she ordered. Fenrir hesitated, but he obeyed. Voldemort had told him to follow Bellatrix, so refusing her now would be unwise. Greyback conjured a shovel and began to dig. Under the soil lay a coffin, surprisingly intact. "Should I open it?" Bellatrix nodded, and Greyback opened the coffin. Inside was a set of human skeletal remains long stripped of flesh. Bellatrix stepped forward and inspected the skeleton carefully. She noticed a section of bone missing from the left hand, its cut surface smooth, the marks clearly artificial, not natural decay. That wasn't all. She soon found another missing piece on a leg bone, also cleanly cut. Bellatrix had her answer. Close it up and bury it again. Greyback didn't understand her full purpose, but he followed orders, closed the coffin, and reburied it. "Let's go back," Bellatrix said. They vanished with a ripple in space and reappeared at Malfoy Manor. Voldemort's current refuge was under a Fidelius charm and could not be returned to directly by apparition, so they came to the manor first. "There's nothing more for you to do. I'll report to the master," Bellatrix said coldly. "I still don't know anything," Greyback protested. "What use is it if you know? Your last failure already made the master doubt you. You just need to do what you're told." Bellatrix snapped. Voldemort had sent Greyback with Bellatrix because he feared Bellatrix might be ambushed by a Horcrux at the cemetery and lose an important servant. Bellatrix paid Greyback no mind and went to report to Voldemort. A moment later, she stood before him. He looked like a pale, strange infant. "Master, I confirmed it. Besides the gap I previously found, there are new gaps on the bones," Bellatrix reported. "I thought so. I just don't know how far it's progressed." Voldemort fell silent. He had sent Bellatrix to confirm whether his father's bones had been disturbed. The result matched his worst fears. An activated Horcrux was plotting a form of resurrection. A deep sense of crisis rose in Voldemort's heart. Those Horcruxes were splinters of his soul. They carried memories and parts of him from the time they were made. If a Horcrux developed its own will, it would become a dangerous enemy. If it attempted a resurrection, it would certainly turn on the 52. After all, the 52 is the largest portion of the soul. By devouring and merging with the 52, it would gain even greater power, Voldemort said. "Bellatrix, this 61 is yours. You must carry it at all times." He produced an object, the gaunt ring, its appearance altered from the one formerly used to ensnare Sirius Black. He could not keep other Horcruxes on his person. He didn't know how far that Horcrux's resurrection had advanced. If it resurrected, it might come looking for the 52. He wouldn't put all his eggs in one basket. He would have Bellatrix wear this Horcrux like an ordinary 61. Even if something happened to her, others wouldn't suspect it was a Horcrux. "Barty has sent word that his preparations are complete and he can act any time," Lord Voldemort said. "Urge young Malfoy to start his operation immediately to cover Barty's actions. Then you and Fenrir will go and meet him. This time, you must retrieve Harry Potter's blood." "Yes, Master. I will definitely retrieve Harry Potter's blood for you this time," Bellatrix cried, prostrating herself. After Bellatrix left, she went to Malfoy Manor to find Fenrir Greyback and relay the Master's instructions. That night, Matthew received the report Fenrir had brought back. When Matthew learned that Voldemort had sent Greyback to dig up graves at the Gaunt family cemetery, he immediately understood Voldemort was checking whether a Horcrux had been activated and was planning a resurrection. Fenrir also mentioned one more detail whose usefulness Matthew could not yet determine. Bellatrix acquired an extra talisman after returning from Lord Voldemort. Matthew rubbed his chin and thought it over. Fenrir had only noticed the talisman after Bellatrix returned from meeting Voldemort. If Matthew hadn't told him to watch for anything related to the Dark Lord, that detail might have been overlooked. It was unlikely to be a reward. Voldemort wouldn't give out gifts for such routine tasks. Could Voldemort have entrusted a Horcrux to Bellatrix for safekeeping? Matthew wondered. He wasn't sure it was a Horcrux, but the possibility existed. Bellatrix and Barty were among Voldemort's most loyal servants, and with Barty lurking at Hogwarts, it wasn't implausible that one Horcrux might be in Bellatrix's charge. As long as the possibility existed, Matthew wanted to verify it. He didn't want to miss the chance to locate one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Voldemort's current plan did not have Barty cooperating directly with young Malfoy. They were operating on two separate lines. Malfoy could act freely. If he obtained Harry's blood, Bellatrix and Fenrir would come to retrieve it. Matthew could use that as an opportunity to check whether the talisman Bellatrix wore was in fact a Horcrux. A week later, Hogwarts had settled back into a semblance of peace. Apart from Matthew, the other students were diligently practicing Quidditch. Thanks to his stronger physique and improved reflexes and coordination, Matthew already had a huge advantage and didn't spend time on Quidditch drills. He had other matters to attend to, most importantly, supervising Preserved Egg's breakthrough to become a formal wizard. Matthew, Luna, and Preserved Egg went to the Room of Requirement and had it change into a training chamber. Luna was still at the rank of a third-level wizard apprentice. Matthew had brought her along so she could observe the breakthrough. Judging by Luna's and Preserved Egg's cases, Matthew realized his own progress with the meditation method had been very fast, especially through the Sea of Spirit accumulation stage, which he'd completed quickly. Although he had provided the potions Luna and Preserved Egg used, their progress still lagged behind his. Matthew suspected it might be because he had been reincarnated, having lived 2 lives, so his spirit was naturally strong and his spiritual energy accumulated unusually fast. He explained the procedure to the cat and the girl. Breaking through to formal wizard brings a qualitative change, he said. A crystalline shell will form, serving as a bridge between your spiritual reservoir and the outside world. Once the crystal core forms, you must inscribe your innate spell model onto it. Preserved Egg, have you chosen your innate spell? Matthew asked. Yes, Meow, Preserved Egg said without hesitation. I choose Invisible Hand. Preserved Egg loved the runic spell Invisible Hand. For a creature with only paws, the spell was particularly convenient. Matthew nodded. Having reached his level, he had a deeper understanding of innate spells. The innate spell doesn't just eliminate casting time, it also strengthens a spell's power and control, he explained. Use it long enough, and you'll gain a deeper understanding of that spell, and may discover new applications. Matthew, what is your innate spell? Luna asked. I chose Transfiguration, Matthew replied. Is your Transfiguration so powerful because it was inscribed as an innate spell? Luna asked curiously. The innate spell isn't magically going to make someone into a master, Matthew said. It enhances what you're already good at. If someone isn't skilled in Transfiguration, making it an innate spell won't instantly put them on my level. Generally, it's best to select an innate spell from a category you're already proficient in. It'll help your long-term growth. Luna looked thoughtful, considering which specialty she might someday choose. Then I'm definitely choosing Invisible Hand. Meow, Preserved Egg added cheerfully. It can be used for flying, fighting, picking things up. It's perfect for me. Let's begin, Matthew said. He took out an ornate incense burner and a stick of Tier 2 incense, lit it, and set it in the brazier. This incense will make your spiritual reservoir more active and speed its recovery, which helps when inscribing and constructing an innate spell in the reservoir. You can also take a potion that boosts recovery. The effects will stack. Then I'll start. Preserved Egg nodded. After sitting down, it took a small bottle from its pocket and drank a potion, further hastening the recovery of its spiritual reservoir. Before long, it felt that reservoir stirring. Preserved Egg calmed itself, visualized the Invisible Hand spell model in its mind, and mobilized its mental focus to condense the runic pattern. Because the spell model it had chosen was much simpler than Matthew's Transfiguration model, it condensed the Invisible Hand model quickly. Preserved Egg swallowed a pill that stimulated a magical outburst. The drug was powerful. Used improperly, it could create an outburst strong enough to destroy the magical organs inside a body. Once the pill took effect, Preserved Egg's arcane energy surged violently. The power inside its body began to spike. A powerful force spread outward from its form. Matthew raised a hand and projected an even wider, wave-like surge of arcane energy that isolated and stabilized the runaway flow. Steady yourself, concentrate, and condense the spirit core, Matthew instructed. After a long effort, Preserved Egg's energy calmed, and an additional organ appeared between its eyebrows, the spirit core. The Invisible Hand model fused onto the surface of the crystalline shell, and Preserved Egg's innate spell was complete. The physical spirit core between its eyebrows matched the structure present in its spiritual reservoir, and the body's magical organs linked to it. Preserved Egg had successfully advanced to formal wizard. I did it, Meow! Preserved Egg leapt into Matthew's arms. I feel like I can fight so well now. I won't run out of energy like I did in the woods last time. You're already the best fighting cat in the world, Matthew said with a smile. Luna is curious. What changed in your Invisible Hand when it became an innate spell? She asked. Let me try, Meow. Preserved Egg tested the spell. Casting time is gone now, so I can use Invisible Hand instantly. In an instant, it manifested 10 invisible hands. The control's so much sharper, it added. It could now manage 10 hands for relatively precise actions. Previously, handling 4 or 5 had been its limit. Now the number had nearly doubled. Preserved Egg tried a couple of related advanced spells, Grip of Thunder and Hand of Burning. They were more powerful than Invisible Hand, but less convenient for flying or picking things up, so it had opted not to make them its innate spell. To its surprise, the casting speed of both had also improved slightly. Both advanced spells were built on structures added to the Invisible Hand model. Because Invisible Hand was now an innate spell, closely related spells inherited part of the eliminated casting time. You can learn more similar spells later, Matthew told it. There were many variants of Invisible Hand. He recalled that both the Court Wizards and Northland United Wizard Academy had comparable spells that might be traded for later. Matthew handed Preserved Egg a copy of the high-level meditation technique, the Wizard's Manual, Part 1, which he had used. You should change your meditation method after advancing to Formal Wizard. This is a high-level meditation technique, the Wizard's Manual. Luna will also need to switch to the Wizard's Manual after she advances, Matthew added. Based on his observations, if Luna and Preserved Egg didn't switch to the Wizard's Manual, it would be difficult for them to break through to second-level Wizard using other methods. He also taught Preserved Egg 2 techniques he had obtained from Aaron Sile, the God-gathering method and the Spirit condensing method. Without these high-level techniques, secret methods, and supportive potions, Preserved Egg might never reach second-level Wizard before old age. How are the high-level meditation techniques different from the meditation methods you gave us before? Luna asked. High-level techniques accumulate energy and develop the spiritual reservoir far faster than the lower methods, Matthew explained. They also allow you to inscribe additional spell models. While they don't boost spells as much as an innate spell does, they can still eliminate casting time for certain spells. He continued, the Wizard's Manual focuses on cultivating the spiritual reservoir, strengthening the spirit core, and slightly enhancing innate spells. High-level meditation techniques represent a qualitative change for runic magic. In actual combat, removing casting time for some spells is a huge advantage. Since Voldemort still lived, Matthew wasn't planning to publish the meditation method broadly. If Voldemort cultivated the method, it would be much harder to deal with. Runic magic without a meditation method held little advantage in practical combat, but because of its nature, it was very suitable for converting Muggle technology into enchanted devices. That was a major reason Matthew promoted runic magic. After several months of advocacy, his employees had basically mastered Invisible Hand. A dedicated research department had been set up to try to inscribe runic script onto machines. Before long, some interdisciplinary runic technologies might appear. After testing Preserved Egg's strength, Matthew left the room of requirement with Luna and the cat. Today was the day Professor Matthew Black, runic magic lecturer from Ilvermorny, began his public lecture. Thank you all for attending. I didn't expect such a full house, Matthew said, smiling. The Great Hall had been temporarily converted into a massive classroom, and a giant screen was set on the wall behind the podium to magnify his actions for those in the back. Students from all years at Hogwarts attended, and delegations from other schools had come as well. Even the professors were present. Dumbledore and the principals of the other schools sat in the front row. In the second row sat the Hogwarts faculty. Matthew was currently the leading authority on runic magic in the magical world, and many wanted to hear what he had to say. Some say that Invisible Hand was just a fluke and does not represent a whole new system, he began. If there were only one spell, they might be right. One spell alone wouldn't define a separate magical system. He produced a transparent glass tank filled with water. I think anyone with some knowledge of the Muggle world will know this is a Muggle-made water tank, he said, and took out a thermometer. This will let me measure the water temperature. He demonstrated. 8 degrees. It's a bit cold. The water temperature is low. Now I will use runic magic to change the water temperature. He chose a familiar runic structure, the temperature control charm. Temperature regulation has significant practical applications. If such a runic capability could be popularized and converted into products usable by non-wizards, it would advance technology in a meaningful way. Matthew slowed his practiced casting slightly. The giant screen focused on his right hand. 64 runic scripts for the temperature control charm condensed and then, guided by arcane energy, formed a specific structure. The runic formation turned into a stream of light and submerged itself into the water. The image on the screen shifted to the tank, and the water inside instantly began to boil. The reading on the thermometer shot up. The boiling water in the tank and the thermometer's rapid climb drew a chorus of exclamations. Matthew's command of runic magic was clearly extraordinary. "This is the runic temperature control charm," he announced, holding his hands out for everyone to see. "And because of the runic script system, these spells can be cast wandlessly and silently." He paused, then a lower-year student raised a hand. "Professor Black, can beginners learn to cast without a wand and without speaking?" "Of course," Matthew said. "If you learn runic magic, you only need to master the condensation method for runes and the method of guiding a spell model. Different runic spells have different difficulties. The more runes you need, the harder it is. The temperature control charm I just demonstrated requires condensing 64 runes. There will be an article about the temperature control charm in today's runic magic column of the Wizarding newspaper. If you're interested, check it out." "I have other examples," he added. Matthew condensed 6 runes with his right hand, used his guiding power to arrange them into a precise structure, and the resulting spell pattern blossomed into a brilliant sphere of light floating in his palm. Many in the Great Hall felt a strange familiarity from the glow. "Isn't that just the Lumos charm?" someone murmured. "This is the runic version of Lumos," Matthew said. "Many of the spells you already know can be translated into runic magic. Once translated, they also gain the ease of wandless and silent casting." That revelation caused even greater excitement than the earlier demonstration. The heads and professors in the front row leaned toward one another, whispering. Bathsheba Babbling, the ancient runes professor, murmured, "This is a major discovery. Translating spells into runes may be restoring ancient magic. Perhaps the spells used by wizards in old times were runic in nature." "Have you translated any other spells?" someone asked. Matthew nodded and demonstrated runic versions of the water-making spell, the levitation charm, the scouring charm, and a few others he had taken the time to convert. As his mastery of runic magic deepened, translating simple spells had become easier. "There are many more spells that could be translated, but there are too many in the world and not enough time. I'll publish these in the runic magic column of the Wizarding newspaper for reference. I'm offering these contributions to invite more input. Translating the corpus of known spells is a task that requires many people. I hope more of you will join the effort." "Any other questions?" Hermione raised her hand. "Professor, I've also learned the invisible hand, but I find runic casting a bit slow. Can the speed be improved?" Matthew smiled. "That's an area for further research. With practice, you can speed up both rune condensation and the guidance of a spell model. Runic magic still has shortcomings and needs collective study, but even now, it makes wandless and silent casting far easier, and the runic system meshes well with alchemy, which will push magical technology forward. That alone makes it worth promoting." "By the way," he said, "Magical Age Aerospace Company has already made some progress. We're launching our first satellite at Christmas. This is the first step in our Starlink project, opening a new chapter in humanity's dialogue with the stars. The Wizarding world is about to witness a historic moment." Reporters from the Wizarding newspaper were taking notes, and over the next days, headlines would brim with the news. A murmur ran through the Great Hall. Even the heads and professors were surprised. They had expected a few demonstrations, not an announcement about satellites and a Starlink program. "What's a satellite?" someone asked. "Muggles put them in orbit. Are these the same? Starlink? Dialogue with the stars? My eagle eye can do that," comments floated about before Matthew continued. "Muggle satellites are mostly used for positioning and communications," he explained. "Many people don't realize that the reason the Wizarding newspaper can show live broadcasts from abroad is because of satellite technology. There's a lot of magical interference on land and sea. It's difficult to achieve ultra-long-distance live broadcasting from the ground. The sky has less interference, so our broadcast relays use satellites for now, but we're borrowing Muggle infrastructure. In future, Magical Age Aerospace Company will build a global Starlink to provide better services for wizards everywhere. Matthew had larger plans. He envisioned building a new global transit network through Starlink to make travel more convenient, but that would run into objections from various ministries of magic, so he wasn't ready to announce it. The Triwizard Tournament's loaded wand idea had also given him ideas for creating authorized devices that even non-wizards could use, a Starlink network with authorized terminals that could grant access to runic spells. The number of wizards is small. To advance magical technology, he wanted all humanity to participate. But that was a long-term goal with many hurdles. When class ended, the Wizarding newspaper and other outlets published coverage. The Daily Prophet ran a gushing piece. In yesterday's class, Professor Matthew Black revealed a revolutionary advance. Several everyday spells have been successfully translated into runic form, making wandless and silent casting far easier and enriching magical life. Professor Black also announced that Magical Age Aerospace Company plans to launch the first satellite for the Starlink project this Christmas. According to reliable sources, the company will launch its first satellite this Christmas, a major technological leap that signals a new era for the wizarding world. The Starlink project will bring us closer to the stars and expand the boundaries of magic. Professor Black and the Magical Age Group are pioneering fields unexplored by wizards, work that will undoubtedly be remembered in the history of magic. Prepare to welcome this historic moment. Matthew skimmed the article and recognized Rita Skeeter's style. Since he had personally paid a visit to settle their misunderstanding, Rita had stopped publishing anything critical about him. She instead praised any of his news. The Wizarding newspaper carried no dissenting voices. As a platform, it wouldn't easily offend him now that its user base had grown. Even newcomers couldn't compete with Magical Age Publishing House unless there were major policy errors. After a while, Matthew noticed Draco slipping out of a dormitory corridor. Draco paused when he saw Matthew, gave a brief greeting, and left the common room. Matthew lingered with the paper for a moment longer before putting it away and leaving. He had been sitting in the common room waiting for Draco. Tonight was the time arranged with the Death Eaters. Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Professor Moody, had used the excuse of having Harry and Draco help him sort materials. Draco needed to find an opportunity to get Harry injured and obtain her blood. If he failed, Barty would take action himself. Draco went straight to the Defense Against the Dark Arts office. "Professor Moody, I'm Draco Malfoy," he said, knocking. Inside, heavy footsteps sounded. A moment later, the door opened a crack, and a single magical eye swept over Draco. Its cold gaze made him shiver. "Come in." Moody admitted him and shut the door. He lowered his voice. "You know what to do, right?" Draco nodded. "Yes." Moody continued, his voice low and urgent. "I'll say it again. When Harry Potter comes in, I'll have her process something for tomorrow's class. You must find an opportunity to make her make a mistake and get injured. Then we can quietly collect the blood. Remember, I'm not going to act myself. I don't want to expose this identity. Don't you dare blow it." He was bluffing to force Draco to try his hardest. If Draco failed, Moody would certainly step in. Draco nodded repeatedly. He wasn't especially tense. Matthew had told him Harry would cooperate, and with Matthew and Harry's help, the task shouldn't be hard. Another knock interrupted them. "Professor, I'm Harry Potter." Moody shot Draco a warning look before opening the door, putting on the gruff, cautious persona. He inspected Harry through the crack before letting her in. "What do I need to do?" Harry asked, quickly taking in the room. On the table sat a water tank full of ugly green creatures, Grindylows, reeking and slimy, with horned heads and tentacled limbs. "I need to use Grindylows in tomorrow's lesson, but they're hard to find. I only caught these at noon and haven't had time to process them. I need your help." Moody grinned, a sinister expression. "Don't worry, you'll both get points for helping." "How should the Grindylows be processed?" Harry frowned. They looked filthy and slimy. "You'll need knives," Moody said. He opened a drawer, took out tools, handed them to Draco and Harry, and demonstrated the procedure. "Use the knife to cut out the sharp teeth in the tentacle suckers. If you don't, they'll bite the younger students. I've got essays to grade and don't have time for this. I'll leave them to you. Those teeth are sharp. Be careful." Moody showed no hint of weakness. He returned to his desk and buried himself in grading. Harry and Draco moved to the tank. They each picked a spot. Draco could see Moody at the desk, and Harry's back was turned toward him. With Moody's attention occupied, neither could see what they were about to do. They began to process the Grindylows. After a while, Draco barked, "Potter, you're too slow. At this rate, we'll never finish by tomorrow." "I'm getting the hang of it," Harry said. "I'll speed up." Draco sneered. "By the time you're any good, it'll be dawn." Crude Gryffindor. Can't even manage this. Although Harry knew this was part of the plan, Draco's taunts made her hands move faster. Draco kept up the insults to rile her. When he glanced toward Moody, he saw he wasn't paying attention. Just as Draco was about to make his move, a sudden cry of surprise came from Harry's side. 332, Horcrux in hand. Harry's outcry drew Draco and Professor Moody's attention. "What's the matter? Having trouble?" Professor Moody asked. "Nothing. Just a Grindylow spat some slime. It's disgusting," Harry replied. "Grindylow secretions aren't poisonous. Don't worry," Professor Moody said casually, then shot Draco a hard look, signaling him to move. Draco nodded. After confirming Moody wasn't watching, Harry used a small knife to nick the webbing of his left hand. Blood welled up. He bit down on the pain and pressed his sleeve to the wound to keep the blood from pooling on the desk. With a barely perceptible nod, he signaled Draco to act. Draco produced the small bottle Matthew had given him and, with deliberate haste, tipped it so a labeled quantity of Harry's blood spilled onto the table. He then pretended to snatch for Harry's knife. "Potter, you're too slow. Give me all the extra points." Harry played along with an exaggerated hiss. Professor Moody looked up at once. Seeing the wound and the blood on the table, something like triumph lit his face. "My mission is complete," he thought, "now to secure the blood." "Harry, are you hurt?" he asked as he hurried over to examine the cut. After confirming it was real, he said, "I'm out of dittany here. Go to the hospital wing and get that treated before it gets infected." "I haven't finished," Harry began apologetically. "It's fine. I can get someone else to finish." Moody waved him off, eager to see him leave. "You should go now." "All right, Professor?" Harry nodded and left the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. Professor Moody produced an empty glass tube and flicked his 49. The blood on the table gathered as if called, flowing into the tube. He thought about sending someone to put the vial in the Forbidden Forest, but decided it would be safer to deliver it personally. "Draco, do I still need you on those Grindylows?" "Yes, Professor. We'll need them for class tomorrow." Moody shrugged on his trench coat and left the office. Everything went according to plan. Harry hadn't suspected anything and could continue to be watched at Hogwarts. The Master valued the identity of the One. Barty did not intend to lose that role lightly. Curfew had not yet begun, and some students still wandered the corridors. Barty nodded to a few who greeted him. As a 38, he moved through the castle without question. He left the castle and headed straight for Hogsmeade. Because of the Triwizard Tournament, much of the Forbidden Forest was cluttered with filming and temporary works, making it unsuitable for a meeting, so they had arranged to meet in Hogsmeade. Once on the village outskirts, Barty checked to make sure no one followed him, then approached a house and knocked. "Who is it?" a muffled voice asked from inside. "Moody," Barty replied. A moment later, a hook-nosed man opened the door and, after a quick appraisal, stepped aside. Inside, Bellatrix Lestrange and Fenrir Greyback waited in the living room. "You've got it?" Bellatrix demanded as she rose. Barty produced the tube from his pocket and shook it. "Of course I have it." Bellatrix visibly relaxed. "Good, the Master won't stand for any more failure." They had planned for Draco to make the delivery, so Bellatrix had expected him. Barty snorted. "Not us. The last failure was Greyback's. I succeeded as soon as I moved." Fenrir growled. "That enemy was strong. Even you wouldn't have fared better." Bellatrix accepted the tube, and for a moment, the meeting proceeded smoothly. "What of Draco?" she asked casually. "Promising. Much more sensible than his father." Barty smiled. "He handled it well." Bellatrix nodded. "For that, let him become a Death Eater. I'll ask the Master to recruit him." There were gaps in the Death Eater ranks. Many rising talents were connected to Matthew Black, which worried the leadership. Bellatrix's expression changed, however, as she reached for her 49, intending to apparat. Fenrir's eyes flared a vivid red, a telltale sign of external compulsion. Suddenly, the splinching of a botched apparition shredded most of her right hand. Barty and Bellatrix's faces went pale. Fenrir's gaze glowed unnaturally. "Imperio," Bellatrix hissed. "When did Greyback?" Barty, reacting on instinct, flicked his fort. "Avada Kedavra!" A streak of green flew at Greyback. The werewolf rolled and countered with fiendfire, a torrent of hellish flame that set the room ablaze. Bellatrix, losing blood and consciousness, tried to retrieve her severed limb but was pushed back by the fire. Her wand was gone, ripped away in the chaos, and she panicked. "Barty, help me!" Barty, however, had other priorities. Bellatrix carried Harry Potter's blood, the commodity the master wanted most. He judged she could not escape on her own, and reaching into his pocket, pulled something out, activated it, and flung it toward her. "Catch!" Bellatrix snatched the object. The next instant, her face contorted with horror. "No! My 48! Something in the device yanked at her like a leash. She vanished from the room. The object Barty had thrown was an activated 31, a portkey. As her body disappeared, Barty noticed a 48 lying on the floor by the severed hand. "Humph. Women are trouble," he muttered, unaware that the ring he'd just propelled away was the very 48 the master had given Bellatrix. Clapping sounded from a corner of the room, slow, cold. Barty's skin crawled. He backed away as the unmistakable form of Matthew Black stepped from the ring of golden flames. He had been watching, controlling Greyback from a distance to keep his hand hidden. Barty's mind raced. "Matthew Black," he stammered. "How are you here?" "I ran into the professor on a walk and saw something unsavory," Matthew said, and made up a plausible explanation on the spot. He had intended to conceal his part in the evening's events, but now there was no hiding what came next. With a snap of his fingers, the fiendfire surged toward Barty as if animated by thought. Barty dodged, but the fire obeyed Matthew and moved with terrifying flexibility. Before he could apparate, hoping to avoid the risk of splinching, Fenrir lunged at him, clamping his jaws and arms around Barty. Barty struggled, then the flames closed in. "No!" Barty screamed. Barty and Fenrir merged with the fiendfire. Moments later, they were only ash. Matthew did not hesitate. Greyback had been compromised and was no longer useful. Matthew picked up Bellatrix's severed hand, removed the 48 from its finger, and tossed the limb into the blaze. The fiendfire accepted the new fuel and flared, but it behaved like a well-trained creature at Matthew's command. Having mastered fiendfire, he controlled it as easily as moving an arm. He examined the 48. It was a finely wrought alchemical piece of pure gold, unlike the fake 21 ring Sirius had found. Matthew injected a bit of 46 into it. The gem glowed and released a trickle of spring water. It didn't look like a Horcrux, at least not by appearance. He had another test. He attempted to travel with the ring so he could probe it in another realm. Instantly, he felt a severe obstruction. A conscious soul clung to the object. Carrying a conscious soul across planes required enormous energy and left an unmistakable blockage. He canceled the travel. A Horcrux, then, someone's soul fragment trapped inside. Voldemort's alchemy was meticulous. Externally, the ring showed no hint of its true nature. Matthew held it with his invisible hand and lowered it into the fiendfire to strip away its outer metal. After a few breaths, the gold melted and fell away, revealing what lay beneath. Was this the 21? The band remained gold, but its shape and patterns were different. Set into it was a black gemstone engraved with the Peverell coat of arms, the mark tied to the legend of the Deathly Hallows. When the ring's disguise melted, it resembled the fake 21 Sirius had carried. Matthew did not want to destroy it outright, even if the legend's power to restore the dead was doubtful, as one of the 27 it had value. He focused the fiendfire on the band. As the metal burned, a tormented scream issued from inside. "Ah, stop! Stop it now!" The Horcrux howled, trying to bargain with offers of dark knowledge and power. "I can teach you secrets, forbidden arts, everything." Matthew was unmoved. The spirit within was young and inexperienced in powerful lore. He continued to burn the band. The wailing grew desperate. A face of black smoke emerged and exploded into nothing. Matthew uttered, "Finite incantatum." With the Horcrux dealt with, he dispersed the fiendfire in the house. Because the fire had remained under his control, it had not spread beyond the building. Hogsmeade remained oblivious for the moment. Matthew pocketed the top 21, changed his appearance, and a 47 slipped out through the window. The back mountain of Malfoy Manor, Lord Voldemort's hideout. The dim room felt oppressively heavy. Bellatrix knelt on the floor, afraid to make a sound. She had retrieved Harry Potter's blood and brought it straight to her master, but Voldemort's interest had lain elsewhere. When she admitted that she had inadvertently lost a certain important item, she felt his fury crest like a storm. "You're saying Greyback was being controlled?" Voldemort's voice rasped further than usual. "Yes, master," Bellatrix whispered. "Greyback was acting very strange. He didn't seem himself. He must have been under the Imperious curse. Imperious, and an Imperious right under my nose." Voldemort murmured the name as if tasting it. "Dumbledore? And that fool Barty Crouch Jr.!" Voldemort's voice hardened. He drew a sharp breath. "Is there anything wrong with Barty?" Bellatrix hesitated, then shook her head. "Barty shouldn't have been controlled. I had lost the item I was carrying at the time and couldn't leave with Potter's blood, so he insisted I take it and hurled the potion over. It seems someone wanted Greyback to foil my plans," Voldemort said. He did not believe Crouch had been controlled. After all, Barty Crouch Jr. had long been subjected to control and had developed a certain resistance. But Fenrir Greyback? Voldemort's first suspect was Dumbledore. After all, Greyback had been in the Forbidden Forest recently. Yet Greyback should not have had any contact with Dumbledore. That night, Barty, using his position as a professor, had altered the forest's protective charms from the inside so commotions there would not spill out. Dumbledore had been unaware until it was over. If it wasn't Dumbledore, then Voldemort's pupils narrowed until they were slits as he thought of the Horcrux that had been activated. This is troublesome. If Greyback had truly been controlled by an activated Horcrux, the consequences were dire. Whoever had activated that Horcrux might now be in possession of one of his other soul fragments. Voldemort repeatedly tried to reach Barty through the magical link, but there was no answer. At first, he clung to hope. Perhaps Barty was occupied with Greyback's attack and could not answer. As minutes dragged on, that hope withered into a cold awareness. The call would not be returned. Barty was either unconscious or dead. In either case, the activated Horcrux would almost certainly have taken the other Horcrux. "Bellatrix, the things I told you to prepare. Brew them tonight," Voldemort roared, losing his restraint. Losing Hufflepuff's cup and another Horcrux in quick succession had unnerved him. He could not wait. He needed to be resurrected now. "Yes, master." Bellatrix scrambled to obey. In a whirl of motion, she prepared the ritual. Soon a large, bubbling cauldron stood before Voldemort. "Do it, quickly," Voldemort urged. Bellatrix picked up the malformed, infant-like body and dropped it into the boiling potion. The flesh sank. "Bone of the father," she intoned, and into the cauldron she tossed the prepared bone. The surface hissed and sparked. The brew turned a vivid, unnatural blue. "Flesh of the servant." Bellatrix took a knife and sawed off another section of her already mangled right arm, flinging it in without flinching. Her face shone with a fanatic joy that drowned out the pain. The potion shifted from blue to a bright, fiery red. Blood of the enemy. She uncapped the vial of blood she had brought and poured it in. "Master is coming back," Bellatrix cried as the cauldron erupted into light, the surface spitting sparks. Then the motion slowed. White steam rose, and from it a tall, thin figure emerged. As the steam cleared, the pale, skull-like face, the flat nose, the blood-red eyes were visible once more. "Welcome back, master," Bellatrix breathed, offering him his wand. Voldemort took it, flexing his new wrist to accustom himself to the body. Then, in an instant, he pointed the wand at Bellatrix. Crucio. A red light like blade heat engulfed her. Bellatrix collapsed, convulsing and shrieking, the cruciatus tearing through muscle and bone. No ordinary creature could have withstood that agony. Voldemort poured all the rage he'd bottled up over lost Horcruxes into the curse. "You useless trash, I told you! Guard that item!" he hissed through clenched teeth. The red stream faded, and Voldemort steadied himself. If not for his absolute mastery of the unforgivable curses, the backlash might have injured him. He stopped and checked his body. Something felt blocked. The flow of his magical essence was off. He didn't know that the blood he had used to renew himself contained a product from an obscurus research lab, a suppressive serum used to dampen violent obscurial energy. Matthew's blood had been laced with that suppressant. Voldemort had never encountered such a thing. His veins now carried components that muzzled his raw power. He concluded he simply had to adapt to the new vessel and press the problem aside for the moment. Though you lost important things, you brought me Potter's blood. I will not be stingy with rewards. Voldemort waved his wand. Silver light knifed through the air and congealed into a human hand. It flew across the room and grafted itself to Bellatrix's stump, merging perfectly into a long, silver-glowing prosthetic glove. My master, thank you. I love this beautiful hand. Bellatrix forced herself up and knelt, tears of pain and devotion streaking her face. She had survived only because she was monstrously tough. I appreciate your loyalty, Bellatrix, Voldemort said warily, but be smarter next time. Handle things more cleanly. He felt drained. Restoring Bellatrix's limb and fighting the strange blockage in his own system had sapped more energy than he expected. It was his first resurrection by this ritual, and he could not tell whether the strange malaise was normal. Still, he could not linger. He had to learn the status of his remaining Horcruxes. He raised his wand and cast the probing spell used to sense Horcruxes. An illusory diary mark formed in the air, then shattered. Voldemort's face darkened. Was the diary already destroyed? That Horcrux had been entrusted to someone long ago. He had not asked about it while hiding near Malfoy Manor, and he had not expected it to be gone. Damn Malfoy, he spat, his pale face flushing with anger. If Lucius Malfoy had been here, Voldemort would have finished him with a killing curse on the spot. He steadied himself and cast the sensing spell again. An illusory mark for the ring blossomed in the air and shattered as well. As I feared, he said quietly, that Horcrux was destroyed too. Whoever is moving now is fast, already absorbing the soul fragments. He sent the spell forth again. A locket's image formed. This one did not shatter, but shone brightly. The locket isn't destroyed, but it's unresponsive. It's the locket that was activated. Voldemort's voice was cold. He had found his target. A Horcrux does not activate by itself, he said. His gaze hardened as he thought of one particular young man. Regulus, was it you? The locket had been hidden and protected by his most insidious enchantments. Its location should have been all but impossible to find. Only a handful of people had known, and Regulus Black and his house elf had been directly involved. Voldemort had been occupied with hunting the Boy of Prophecy and had paid little attention to Regulus's movements. Later, he had tried the magical link to reach Regulus. There had been no reply. Now, upon locking onto Regulus's position, the link burned dim, indicating the man was dead. Did something happen to Regulus? Voldemort murmured, frowning. Without the man himself, uncovering what had happened years ago would be difficult. He pushed the thought aside and continued his scans. He called the next image into being. It shattered. Anothered. Whatever enemies had been working against him had moved quickly. Then, with growing alarm, the probe revealed the diadem's image, and that too was gone. Damn it! Voldemort's voice dropped to a hiss. Did he steal Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem as well? He did not yet know that a Horcrux's resurrection could turn a fragment into an independent soul, no longer tethered as a Horcrux. To Voldemort, the results were terrifying. Of the Horcruxes he had left in the world, all but the one already activated were gone. Fear, cold and insidious, snaked through him. His pulse fluttered, his breath became shallow and quick. Every small noise set his nerves taut. Shadows seemed to hide enemies, the world tilted toward threat. The emotion was no longer mere fear. It felt tangible, gnawing at his courage and fraying the edges of his sanity. He forced himself to inhale and calm his expression. Weakness would only invite disaster. Nagini, he said softly. Fortunately, Nagini had been made a Horcrux later than the others. She would not bear the memory of earlier services. A large snake slithered from her hiding place. Taking Nagini with him, Voldemort apparated away. They reappeared in a primeval forest, Albania, where he had hidden for more than a decade. He knew the land intimately. He exhaled with a sound of exhaustion. The continuous conjuring had deepened his fatigue. That strange blockage in his magic nagged at him. He would have to deal with it soon. Yet he was Voldemort, master of the dark arts. There were means to restore body and essence. With a wave of his wand, he drew several animals to him and drained them, wrapping their life into himself in wrappings of mummy-like skin. He found a concealed hollow. "Nagini, hide here," he instructed, curling the great snake into the shadowed undergrowth and sealing the place with dark wards. 334. The Vanished Crook Mountains. "The Yule Ball starts tomorrow," Hermione said, her face tight with tension. Neither of her two friends gave her the reply she wanted. Sigh. Ron sat listless, as if everything had suddenly lost its color. Just before Christmas, he had changed back from the personality he'd briefly taken on, and Ron was bitterly disappointed. He had been planning to invite Harry to dance at the ball. Damn it, why hadn't that lasted a few more days? Where was he supposed to find a date now? "I've invited Ginny," Harry said with a smile. After he'd been transformed into a girl, Ginny had stopped being so shy around him, and the two had grown closer. Hermione curled her lip in anger. Harry was one thing. As Ginny's best friend, she understood why Ginny liked him. But Ron was being so tactless. It wasn't that Hermione was in love with Ron, but as a friend, shouldn't he at least have made some sort of gesture before inviting someone else? He'd simply ignored her. It showed Ron didn't care about her at all. Hermione snapped her book shut, clutching it to her chest, and left the common room. "Eh? Going back to the dorm so soon? I don't feel like reading anymore." Ron and Harry exchanged a look. "Did we upset her?" Ron asked. "Maybe?" Harry shrugged, watching Hermione's quick, retreating back. In the Gryffindor girls' dormitory, Hermione's roommates were chatting about the Yule Ball. "Parvati, have you been asked to the ball yet?" "I've had quite a few invitations." "Sigh, I'm torn. Every one of them is so nice." "Lavender, are you really planning to ask Ron tomorrow?" "Yes, I'm going to." "I didn't expect you to like that sort of thing." "Harry's potion side effects are gone. I really hope he asks me. If Harry asked, I'd definitely accept." "I wonder if Granger has been asked yet. Harry and Ron are both close to her." "They probably won't ask her. She's so arrogant." "Shh, she's here." Hermione heard their voices and felt the insult like a physical thing. Her roommates averted their eyes guiltily, suddenly busy with some imaginary task. The dormitory fell awkwardly silent. Hermione set her book on the bed but didn't want to stay. She needed an excuse to leave the tense air. "I forgot something," she lied, and grabbed her things. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. So unfair. So hurt. She forced them back and slipped out into the corridor, past the common room where Harry and Ron were still sitting. She walked the castle aimlessly. She couldn't focus on reading. She didn't know where to go. Who could she ask to be her partner? Her popularity certainly wasn't what she imagined. Miss Know-It-All wasn't exactly endearing. Her forceful manner made most people keep a respectful distance. Hermione ran through likely candidates in her head. The one she would most want to ask was Matthew Black. Matthew was the brightest prodigy of the younger generation, bristling with honors and the Hogwarts champion. Few girls could resist inviting him. Any girl dancing with Matthew would be the brightest star of the ball. She sighed. She didn't see herself as good enough to ask Matthew. If only her family had lived in Ottery St. Catchpole, maybe she'd have known him as Luna did, from childhood. Hermione remembered the champions from the other schools, but none of them compared to Matthew. He had been dazzling in the Triwizard Tournament. She'd watched every Hogwarts team's clip. Among the other champions, no one had left a deep impression. "Senior Matthew is just too dazzling," she murmured. "What's wrong with Matthew?" The sudden voice almost made Hermione jump out of her skin. She turned to see a black cat sitting on the window ledge. "It's Preserved Egg." "Good evening," Hermione greeted, a little embarrassed. "Good evening, meow." The cat flicked its tail. "Where's Crookshanks?" Preserved Egg was well acquainted with Crookshanks. The two often slipped out of the dormitories at night to tour the Forbidden Forest. Hermione realized she hadn't seen Crookshanks since the afternoon. "Let's go find him together," she said, scooping Preserved Egg into her arms. Since she didn't want to return to the dorm, she might as well look for Crookshanks. "It's curfew, meow. Aren't you going back?" Preserved Egg asked, surprised. "I'm not going back yet. Let's find Crookshanks first." Hermione felt a small thrill. This was the first time she had broken curfew of her own accord, not because of Harry or Ron. She should see Hogwarts at night. She carried Preserved Egg through the quiet corridors, then toward the Forbidden Forest. "Preserved Egg, Why do you feel so light? She asked, bouncing the cat slightly. I'm not the original, meow, Preserved Egg said. The original split into many clones to look for Crookshanks. Oh, no wonder, Hermione frowned. How many clones did you make? 8, meow, Preserved Egg answered. Even with 8 clones, we haven't found Crookshanks yet. Hermione's worry deepened. She'd better check the places Crookshanks like to go. Have you checked the Forbidden Forest? Not yet. Shall we go now? Preserved Egg said. Let's go, Hermione agreed without hesitation. The Triwizard Tournament was in the second week after the Christmas holidays. The tournament committee was already making final preparations, and the Forbidden Forest was marked off. Tournament venue under maintenance, entry prohibited. Hermione glanced at the sign, wondering how many points she'd lose if caught. Don't worry, no one's in there at this hour. The committee only works the forest during the day, Preserved Egg said. Hermione stepped over the low railing and slipped into the trees. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the forest was very dark. She tightened her hold on Preserved Egg. If she hadn't had the cat with her, she wouldn't have come. Don't squeeze too tight, meow, Preserved Egg complained. I'm only a clone. Squeeze too hard, and I'll disappear. Preserved Egg's clones couldn't take much damage. Hermione extended her right hand, condensed 6 runes, and used a binding rune to guide them into a particular pattern. A ball of bright light hummed up and floated in her palm. You've already learned the runic version of Lumos. You're so clever. It took me a long time to learn runic script, meow. Preserved Egg purred. This binding rune is fairly simple. Only 6 runes. It's much easier than the invisible hand. That one needs 16, Hermione said. Besides, I'd already mastered basic runes before learning runic magic. Where shall we look for Crookshanks? Hermione asked. Let's ask my Kneazle friends, Preserved Egg suggested, leading her deeper into the forest to the wild Kneazle's territory. Preserved Egg gave a strange high call, meow, and dark shapes stirred in the trees. Kneazles dropped from branches and padded out from the undergrowth, stopping a few meters away and eyeing Hermione warily. Preserved Egg chattered to them in Kneazle language. They say Crookshanks hasn't come to the Forbidden Forest. Meow, he reported after a moment. Could he be somewhere else in the forest? Hermione asked. If Crookshanks had come, he'd have come to see them, Preserved Egg said. Hermione felt increasingly at a loss. Shall we check the castle then? The Black Lake, the Humping Willow. My clones already checked those places. Meow, Preserved Egg said. A terrifying roar cut through the trees, a deep, bone-rattling sound that made Hermione tremble. The Kneazles scattered and disappeared into the undergrowth. What was that? Hermione whispered, afraid to draw attention. An exceptionally large dragon, Preserved Egg said, voice low. I heard it's a cross between a Hungarian horntail and a Ukrainian ironbelly. I went to look. It's nearly 100 feet long. 100 feet? A grown Ukrainian ironbelly is usually only about 60, Hermione exclaimed. Could it be for the next task? The committee brought that dragon for the next task, Preserved Egg said. Since Crookshanks isn't here, let's go back to the castle. Maybe he's sleeping in some corner. Hermione nodded and started back, stepping quickly through the dark. After a short distance, Preserved Egg suddenly stiffened in her arms. Someone's here, he whispered. Hermione immediately snuffed out the light and crouched, holding Preserved Egg close. The moonlight thinned, and she couldn't see much, but she thought she smelled meat, charred meat, and the scent made her stomach clench. A black-robed figure moved out of the trees a short distance away. Even under the moon, the figure's face was hidden by the hood, but Hermione glimpsed the left hand, flesh-torn, charred, bloody. The figure took out a bottle of potion and poured it onto the wound. Hiss, this hurts like death, came a voice Hermione felt she'd heard before. The figure hurried toward the forest edge and was gone. Preserved Egg wanted to go check near the dragon. The dragon is dangerous. You shouldn't go, Preserved Egg insisted. You should go back to the castle and keep looking for Crookshanks. I'm only a clone. If anything happens, the original will know. Judging by the figure's burned hand, the dragon was not to be trifled with. Hermione's curiosity battled with common sense, and common sense won. All right, she said. I'll keep looking for Crookshanks. Goodbye, Preserved Egg. She left the Forbidden Forest and quickened her pace. She didn't see the black-robed figure again. Earlier that day, Crookshanks had not gone on his usual patrol around the Black Lake. The lake was his territory. He didn't like other cats fishing there. That afternoon, he'd seen a suspicious figure and silently followed her up to the 8th floor. He trailed the person to a stretch of wall opposite the Barnabas the Barmy tapestry. The woman performed a series of strange movements, and a smooth door appeared in the stone. Crookshanks slipped inside after her. The door closed, becoming wall once more. After curfew, the wall shifted again and produced the door. The person who'd entered earlier came out, but Crookshanks did not follow her back out. Inside the wizard tower, Matthew continued another round of strengthening his bloodline secret art. After the first event of the Tri-Wizard tournament, he had already consumed the second one. Now he prepared to take the third one to condense his second 24. 0. Check my physical changes, he said. A translucent display appeared before him. Strength 3.7, Constitution 4.4, Agility 9.0, Perception 19.4. The first use of the 1 had raised his strength by 0.2, Constitution by 0.3, Agility by 0.2, and Perception by 0.1. The second use had added Strength plus 0.2, Constitution plus 0.2, Agility plus 0.1, and Perception 0.1. Matthew drank the 17. It emitted a faint blue glow and left his body pleasantly warm, tasting surprisingly like a rich seafood broth. Moments later, he felt a jolt in his consciousness and an illusion of his senses sharpening, an expected effect of the 1. 0. Check my physical changes, he repeated. The display updated. Strength 3.8, Constitution 4.5, Agility 9.1, Perception 19.5. Each attribute had increased by 0.1. Once his body fully digested the pawn in a couple of days, there would be further gains. Matthew decided to stay in the tower for a few days and condense the 24 only after the 40 had fully assimilated. After making that decision, he took the set of 25 from his pocket and spent 10 minutes nourishing them with the way he had been doing daily. Now that his link with the 25s had matured, he could sense a faint 39 consciousness within them. With continued daily mana feeding, that consciousness grew steadily. He wasn't sure whether this was a side effect of refining the 25s into pseudo-horcruxes or simply how they were by nature. He would ask Isis about it later. 10 minutes later, he finished the nourishing routine and ascended to the 6th floor to inspect progress there. Once the 16s finished clearing the flesh walls on the 5th floor, they could enter the 6th floor. The 6th floor housed the data cores for the other sub-tower, 39s aside from Za 13, but the situation there was grim. What had seemed like a spreading wall of flesh on the 5th floor was only an offshoot of a massive mutated organism entrenched on the 6th floor. Half the floor was occupied by an enormous sphere of living flesh, pulsing like a heart. The fleshy tumors and walls on the 5th floor and the lower levels had grown from that sphere. Those fleshy walls had extreme regenerative capabilities and could even absorb magical attacks. Attacking them with 41 only caused them to proliferate. Even fiendfire was absorbed. The heart-like sphere shared those same properties. It could take in 41 as nourishment. Master, the tools of the 60s cannot cut open that flesh sphere, 43 reported. Its regeneration outpaces any incision we can make. The strong acid that corroded the walls before failed to do significant damage. The rate of corrosion is slower than its regeneration. Many of the 16's tools were magically enhanced, but magic was ineffective against the sphere, forcing them to resort to purely physical methods. Saws, drills, acids, none could breach it. Matthew frowned. Whatever was gestating inside that sphere could be dangerous. He hoped it did not share the same 41 absorbing ability as the walls. There is one more option we haven't tried, said. I successfully extracted the 3 recipe from the Alchemy Workshop's Tower 39 core, and 3, an alchemical corrosive bomb, should destroy the flesh sphere, but many materials are missing to craft it. After clearing the walls, the 16s had discovered 2 damaged Tower 9 cores, one for the Alchemy Workshop and one for the Potion Workshop. Both were severely damaged and could not be activated. 0 had been extracting residual data. The 4-3 recipe came from the Alchemy Workshop core, hence the potential solution. Alchemical corrosive bomb? Give me the list of missing materials, Matthew said. A translucent list materialized. Most of these are expensive, he said, frowning. And rare. The recipe was old. Many original material sources were extinct or nearly so. Cross-reference with the new database and try to substitute alternatives, Matthew ordered. Both 43 and the Alchemy Workshop began analyzing. A moment later, a revised list appeared. I have substituted suitable alternatives from the new database, 43 reported. The new materials included options from both worlds, significantly reducing cost. Concentrated venom from a tree monkey giant toad can be used as a primary ingredient? That saves a lot, Matthew murmured. He was surprised such venom would work. The remaining missing items looked like things that could be found at auction. I'll ask Miss Feely if she can source them, he decided. He also remembered the Tush 12 recipe Feely had given him earlier. She had asked to buy 2 bottles. Since he was going to see her, he might as well bring them. Matthew went to the potion workshop and brewed 3 bottles of 12. One was for himself, but he planned not to use it yet. The Tower 39 had advised waiting until after he condensed the 28's 24. The 12 ghoul was a rank 3 40, while an adult manticore was only a rank 2 magical creature. His perception was already high. If he took them at 12, swell. Now his perception would rise further, and the eventual boost from the 28 bloodline would be diminished. Better to delay. Transforming into Gelman, he returned to the wizarding world with the bottled 12s. Gelman's cover now stood as a professor of pharmacy at the Northland United Wizard Academy, which gave him a solid footing in the 6th Ring Wizard City. He went to the alchemy lab, where the Academy's apprentice-based system had given him 2 pharmacist apprentices as assistants. Teacher, they greeted respectfully. This year's recruitment had not yielded top talent, so Matthew had taken on 2 attractive but inexperienced apprentices. They struggled even with rank 140s. He didn't plan to spend too much time on them. Still, they were useful labor. He supplied practice materials, and they would earn a commission on anything sold. How many bottles of 4 did you brew this week? He asked. I brewed 22 bottles, teacher, the blonde apprentice said confidently. I only brewed 6, teacher, the blue-haired girl replied, biting her lip and looking dejected. Matthew checked the blonde's handiwork, nodded, and encouraged her. Lena, these are good. Only 4 are substandard. You've mastered brewing 4s. Tomorrow I'll teach you how to brew 11s. You can practice that. He examined the blue-haired apprentice's batch and found them all below sale quality. Aya, keep working. Don't be discouraged. The 4 is the simplest rank 140. Put more time into practice, and you'll get there. Yes, teacher, they chorused. Matthew took the 18 saleable bottles from Lena and left the lab. He activated his communication badge and tuned it to the mana frequency Philly had given him. Miss Philly, I brewed the 12s and want to purchase some materials. Are you free? A pleasant voice answered the badge. Mr. Gelman, as expected, the 12 was no trouble for you. I'm not at Chanks and Potions right now. Come to my house. The address is... Feely recited an address in the 5th ring. Matthew took the academy carriage straight there. Railroad tracks, he remarked, raising an eyebrow at a new sight. Tracks being laid along the academy streets. Don't you know? It's the Academy of Magical Engineering's new mana train, the coachman said. I saw their demonstration. It's a huge vehicle, can carry over 100 people. The iron bars are its tracks, like ore-cart rails. Matthew thought of the Academy of Magical Engineering, an offshoot focused on combining 41 with productivity. The last 2 kings had pushed for such integration. Many innovations came from the Northland United Wizard Academy. I hear they'll lay tracks into the city too. Coachmen like me might be out of work, the coachman lamented. If mana trains roll out everywhere, the transport business will change fast, Matthew said. He had a feeling the rollout would be contentious. Carriage guilds were controlled by old noble factions, and mana trains would cut into their business. The 5th Ring neighborhood was more prosperous than the 6th. Many residents were wealthy and included wizards. Matthew was a bit surprised by Feely's modest house. He'd expected the blonde elf, who was related to Her Highness Erin, to live in a grander manner. Instead, it was an ordinary 3-story detached residence, vines and pale flowers climbing its walls. The ground floor had a closed shop that looked long unused. Matthew pulled the doorbell. After a moment, the wooden door opened and Feely peered out. "Good morning, Mr. Gelman," she said. "Good morning, Miss Feely," he replied, and followed her in. "Sorry to intrude. Why aren't you at Shanks and Potions today?" he asked, noticing the house had no servants. "Please sit," she said, pouring black tea. "I'm headed to Silver Phosphor Town to buy materials. If you'd come a bit later, I'd already have left the royal capital. Things are cheaper, and there's more variety there. What do you need? If I can't supply it here, I'll bring some back." Silver Phosphor Town was a trading hub. Eastward lay the Emerald Kingdom, southwest the desert land of gold, and straight south the green mist marsh, an immense rainforest separating north and south. Its location made it a merchant crossroads and a place to find rare regional goods. Matthew handed Feely a list. Besides the materials for the three, he needed to restock other supplies. He also remembered he had a rank 3 bloodline secret art that required a red sand giant scorpion, creatures found only in the desert regions. He asked Feely to keep an eye out for any news or leads on red sand giant scorpions while she was in Silver Phosphor Town. 336. Seed of the human-faced siren bloodline. "Red sand giant scorpion? I'll keep an eye out for it," Feely said. "But that's not a common alchemy ingredient or potion material. It's very hard to obtain. Even in Silver Phosphor Town, it's rare to buy." "I know. If Silver Phosphor Town doesn't have it, forget it," Matthew nodded, taking out 2 small vials. "These are the advancement potions I brewed. Good thing we scheduled the departure for the afternoon, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to get them ready." Feely accepted the potions and handed Matthew a pouch of ether stones. "I keep a treasure weasel. 2 of those potions should be enough to help it advance. It's probably still sleeping. I'll go get it." A short while later, Feely came down holding a treasure weasel. It was still in its growing stage and slept a lot. Its fur was pure white, body slender with short limbs. At a glance, it could be mistaken for a weasel in the mundane world. It slept so soundly it didn't wake even when Feely prodded it. But the moment Feely unscrewed a vial, the weasel's nose twitched. It opened its eyes, and using all 4 paws, scrambled toward the scent. The potion had a powerful pull on it. "Wait, do you even know how to drink that? Stop grabbing!" Feely held the little creature down with one hand and poured the potion into its water bowl. As soon as she let go, the weasel darted over and gulped the potion down. It let out a tiny burp, trotted around in small circles, curled into a ball, and fell asleep again. "Pure white treasure weasels are pretty rare these days," Matthew said with a smile. "The purer the white of a treasure weasel's fur, the purer its bloodline. Only third-tier specimens have the slim chance of producing pure white offspring, and wild weasels rarely reach that tier, so they were becoming scarce." "Yes, raising it cost me a fair bit of my savings," Feely admitted. "I'll take it to Silver Phosphor Town this time. It might help us dig up some treasures." Treasure weasels are unusually sensitive to treasures. It's not just detecting metal or ether stones. It's a magical sense that judges whether something is a treasure by its intrinsic value. Feely had a clerk fetch the few remaining materials Matthew needed. It was almost noon, and Feely offered to treat him to lunch. They went to a busy, long-running restaurant not far from Feely's residence. "I come here often," Feely said. "Don't be fooled by the location. Its food is better than most places in the noble district. Many wizards and nobles come specifically to eat here." "I can tell. It's doing well," Matthew agreed. Outside the restaurant, a number of carriages were parked. As they reached the entrance, Matthew caught sight of 2 familiar figures stepping out. They looked flustered to see him. He was slightly surprised. Those were 2 of his apprentices. Advanced academies used a hands-off teaching style, so it was normal for them to have afternoons free, but they weren't in their academy robes. The blonde wore typical young noble attire. The blue-haired girl was dressed like a maid. "Good afternoon. I didn't expect to see you here," Matthew said warmly. The blue-haired girl bowed quickly. "Good afternoon, Teacher Gelman." The blonde hurriedly composed herself and gave a proper curtsy. "Good afternoon, Teacher Gelman. I'm sorry I didn't explain earlier. Aya is my maid. My family sent her to accompany me to the academy." "That's fine. I don't care about your relationship as long as you both focus on potionology," Matthew replied kindly. Sensing their discomfort, he didn't linger. A waiter led Feely and Matthew to a table. I haven't been here before. Feely, you choose. Pick something good, Matthew said, passing the menu. Feely flipped through it and asked, Are those two your apprentices? Yes, but I didn't know that they had a master-servant arrangement. At the academy, they both wear robes. That's actually common. Many noble families send servants with wizard potential to accompany their heirs, Feely said. Once they become wizards, they wouldn't willingly remain servants, would they? Before they enroll, they sign a binding indenture. Even if they become wizards later, breaking that contract costs a great deal, Feely explained. Speaking of which, Feely, you're a noble yourself, right? It's rare for a noble household not to have a single servant. Matthew noted that with Feely's means, she could easily employ help. Feely stirred her tea and rested her chin in her hand. After Matthew had saved her earlier, she trusted him enough to casually share more about herself. I am a noble now, but I lived as a commoner for a long time. Mixed-blood, long-eared clan members are rare among the nobility. My mother was from the Sill family. My mother fled an arranged marriage and lived under an assumed name for years. She met my father here. My father wasn't a noble, so my mother settled here and I was born here. Later, through some unexpected events, the Sill family found us and my mother returned to them. But I'm more used to life here, so after my mother died, I came back. My house isn't large and doesn't need servants to run it. Besides, I'm not used to outsiders staying long-term, so I don't keep household staff. Matthew apologized. I'm sorry if that brought up unpleasant memories. It's okay. My mother died over a decade ago, Feely said, twisting a strand of hair around a finger. The long-eared clan bloodline in the Sill family is actually only from the last 2 generations. I'm a 3rd-generation long-eared mixed blood, and I'm already an adult, you know. Matthew scratched his head. Long-eared clan wizards live far longer than humans. A pure blood could live thousands of years. Even a 3rd-generation mixed blood like Feely could live several hundred, perhaps 1,000 years. He'd met another mixed blood, Her Highness Erin, who was only a late adolescent by appearance, and was a 4th-generation mixed blood. So Erin and Feely weren't from the same generation. No wonder Feely's talent was so strong. That explains why your magical talent is outstanding, Matthew said. He could sense Feely had reached the limit of a formal wizard and was close to breaking through to 2nd-level wizard. I'm about to break through to 2nd level, but I'm still not as impressive as you, Mr. Gelman. You're so young and already a 3rd-tier pharmacist. My potion making is far inferior. I can only brew 1st-tier potions for now, Feely admitted. The waiter brought their food, and it proved as good as Feely had promised. During the meal, Matthew noticed his 2 apprentices were seated at a distance and seemed reluctant to meet his eyes. He wondered if he came off as intimidating, but decided not to pry. After lunch, Feely received a message from the clerk. They've prepared the goods. Let's go to Changson Potions to pick them up. Then we set off for Silver Phosphor Town. They left and fetched the materials at Changson Potions. Matthew acquired the last items he needed to craft the alchemical item he had planned. After farewell, he teleported from the academy back to his wizard tower. 0. Craft the alchemical item, Matthew said, handing all the materials to his system. Estimated time required, 36 hours, 0 replied. The process was complicated. Even an alchemy workshop would take 36 hours. Fortunately, Matthew needed a few days anyway to fully digest the enhancement elixir he had taken that morning in order to condense a bloodline seed. Meditation could help absorb the elixir more efficiently, so he spent the next days in the quiet room practicing. 3 days later, Matthew felt the elixir had been fully assimilated. 0. Check the changes in my body, he asked as he entered the bio workshop. A semi-transparent hollow screen appeared with the readout: Strength 3.9, Constitution 4.6, Agility 9.1, Perception 19.5. After the elixir, Strength and Constitution had risen by 0.1 again. The 3 doses had collectively increased his Strength by 0.6, Constitution by 0.7, Agility by 0.4, and Perception by 0.3. With these enhancements, he could now attempt to condense the bloodline seed according to the secret technique scroll. Each secret technique had its own method for condensing a bloodline seed, but they all required a clear perception of the bloodline energy within the body. Matthew's perception had always been exceptional. He easily completed the preliminary steps. He guided the bloodline energy flowing through his body to converge at his heart. The energy pooled and, as he focused, took shape. At the same time, his internal etheric power grew restless. The gathered bloodline energy condensed into a small blue sphere in his heart. The etheric power surged toward it. Matthew felt his chest thudding. His heartbeat grew louder and louder, booming like thunder. Inside his heart, besides the new blue sphere, there was also a stable silver sphere, the silver-winged snake bloodline seed he had condensed earlier. As he condensed the new seed, the silver sphere began to tremble. Matthew's expression tightened. He diverted a stream of etheric power toward the silver sphere to stabilize it. After a moment, the silver sphere settled. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Condensing a new bloodline seed while keeping existing seeds stable was more complex than before. If he accumulated many seeds, it would be a severe test of his etheric control. Eventually, the blue sphere fully formed and the turmoil in his etheric channel subsided. The thunderous beating faded away. It's done. He felt his body had grown noticeably stronger. 0. Check my stats. The holo screen updated. Strength 4.2, Constitution 4.8, Agility 9.2, Perception 19.8. Condensing the new bloodline seed had raised strength by 0.3, constitution by 0.2, agility by 0.1, and perception by 0.3. The gain in perception was especially valuable. Matthew's sensing ability had always been a core advantage, and this increase was significant. 0 brought up a mirror so Matthew could check his appearance. There was no visual change. Is it my imagination? He wondered. He felt, oddly, a little more handsome, even though the mirror showed the same face. As a second-level wizard, he had a sharp memory and knew his features intimately. Any subtle change would not escape him. 0, has my face changed? He asked. Scans indicate no change in your facial structure, 0 replied. Indeed, nothing had altered. The human face of a manticore, or similar hybrid forms, didn't necessarily conform to human aesthetic standards. Yet many of those creatures carried ether that could charm the hearts of others. Matthew sensed something deeper than mere appearance had shifted, an underlying enhancement to his charm, a change in aura rather than form. 337. Extrasensory. After Matthew finished condensing the Manticore 22, he took out a Search 11, intending to break through to 20 points in perception in one go. By the Alchemy Workshop's standards, that kind of perception was only reached by third-level wizards with exceptional senses. The potion was colorless and tasteless, like drinking plain water, but an immediate abnormality followed. The information flooding his senses became a chaotic storm. The world spun, directions lost meaning, north, south, east, west, down, left, and right, all blurred into one. Sounds oscillated between silence and cacophony. Smells overlapped into an incomprehensible mass. Flavors assaulted his tongue. His 15 underwent a qualitative change. More than half an hour later, Matthew's senses slowly returned to normal. He checked himself. His senses had transcended ordinary human limits. Where humans hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz, Matthew now picked up sounds up to 300,000 hertz, more sensitive than a bat. His sight, smell, and taste had undergone similar expansions. He named the change super-perception, and the new 44 was controllable. When he didn't deliberately use it, his senses reverted to ordinary levels. His 15 had changed noticeably as well. A translucent light screen appeared before him. A status readout floated in his mind. Strength 4.2, Constitution 4.8, Agility 9.2, Perception 21.3. Drinking the leaven had increased his perception by 1.5 points, an enormous jump. For each point in perception, his perceptual range widened by roughly 100 meters. His current range was over 2,000 meters. Matthew left the wizard tower and flew up into the Gap world to test the change. He discovered his Desktime 15 could now penetrate the Gap world's 46. He wasn't worried about getting lost. He could always return to the wizard tower through the 31. Previously, the mist had made exploring the Gap world dangerous. One step could land you in a 16's nest. Now, with his 15 able to see through the mist, any creature with 49 fluctuations within his range was clearly visible. After avoiding several 16s, his path was unobstructed. A flicker of surprise passed over Matthew's face. He had encountered other wizards, a second level and a group of first level wizards, but their perception couldn't pierce the gap world mist, so they hadn't noticed him. After casting a disillusionment charm, Matthew crept closer. It's actually her. His eyes narrowed. The second level wizard in the group was someone he'd seen before. Under the identity of Alsha, he had attended the auction at Seer Manor. On the way back, a revenge ambush had erupted. He and Aaron had been caught in the crossfire. If not for his strength, he'd have died in the gap world like the other bystanders. The attackers that time had been a white-robed man and a woman in a green hooded robe. The second-level wizard before him now was that hooded woman. She had escaped that day. The other first-level wizards wore robes of the same style. Aaron said that hooded woman's clothing is from the Emerald Kingdom. Are they building a base here? Matthew thought, alarmed. He recognized that this group was constructing structures in the gap world. From the white-robed man's memories he'd seen, they were members of a secret society called the Land of Mist, an organization in the Emerald Kingdom researching the gap world. Could the Land of Mist have discovered the Wizard Tower? Matthew remembered seeing in the white-robed man's memory that they had built bases in the gap world, but this site was dangerously close to his tower. If the tower were exposed, endless eyes would pry into it. Any power would be tempted to claim a wizard tower in the gap world. The tower's 23s hadn't been fully repaired. It couldn't afford exposure. Matthew changed his form to the likeness of the white-robed man. He'd watched the hooded woman in combat. She wasn't overwhelmingly powerful, but her escape techniques were impressive. He couldn't be sure he could detain her by force. From the white-robed man's memory, he had learned that the two had been close, lovers. The white-robed man had been dead when Matthew found the hooded woman, so Matthew could exploit that relationship. He dropped the disillusionment charm and walked toward the hooded woman. "Ida," he called. She, who was directing the others, froze, then turned in surprised delight. "I didn't expect to meet you here, Ada. Seems my luck's finally come back," Matthew said, sounding eager. "Morris, is that really you? Why didn't you come find me?" she asked, composing herself. "I couldn't," Matthew answered helplessly. "I was hunted by that old man, and my four was taken. Without the return sphere, I couldn't go back at all." He mentioned the return sphere deliberately, an item unique to the Land of Mist, to lower her guard. From the white-robed man's four, he had seized two items, a crossing sphere, which allowed entry to the gap world, and a return sphere, which allowed return to the wizarding world through the crossing sphere's node. Ida frowned. "When I left, you were already subdued by Count Brando. How did you escape?" None of his descendants were second-level wizards yet. "When I broke through to second level, he spared me," Matthew said. "Then I got lucky, ran into a powerful monster and escaped while he was distracted. The return sphere had already been confiscated by then. Then your luck was truly something," she said uncertainly. "Ada, don't you remember? We met in the Lost Woodland as apprentice wizards. You were gravely injured. I carried you to Lost Town," Matthew pressed. Fortunately, a second-level wizard's memory is deep. Having seen the white-robed man's memories once, Matthew could accurately recount private moments only the two of them would know. In the wizarding world, telepathic memory reading like that wasn't a second-level exclusive, but the details he recited convinced her. "Morris, I'm sorry I ran back then," Ida said with guilt. "Count Brando was too strong. It's fine. I misjudged his strength too. We couldn't have handled him. And anyway, I dragged you into this. What matters is you're safe," Matthew murmured, moving closer. The hooded woman's guilt intensified. He took advantage of it. "When we went to Sixth Ring Wizard City, weren't we supposed to establish a base for the Land of Mist? Why are you building one here?" he asked. She answered, "I didn't tell you because it was my secret mission. I brought them into Sixth Ring. You were born in the Blizzard Kingdom. I couldn't risk telling you." Her rank in the Land of Mist was higher than the white-robed man's. She had recommended him into the society, so she had greater clearance. When Matthew opened his arms, she leaned in naturally. "Morris," as she leaned, time seemed to slow. It wasn't an illusion. Matthew activated his barrier of time. The barrier wrapped an invisible temporal field around his body. Any matter or energy touching it would be affected, Besides being a defensive measure, the barrier could transfer time power to anyone in close contact, letting time-based effects influence them. Affecting a living being this way demanded a huge expenditure of time power, far more than manipulating objects. In the eyes of the others, they were simply embracing. The other wizards, seeing no conflict, went back to work. Matthew condensed his mental power into transparent tendrils and pierced them into Ida's brow. Mental touch. If she could move, she might have broken free from it, but she couldn't move, and she didn't even sense the intrusion. This was the terrifying edge of time power. Ida's 36 wasn't mobilized. Her natural 7 barrier was being eroded. As a fellow second-level wizard, Matthew's mental strength was slightly stronger than hers at base, and without any resistance, he quickly opened a gap in her 7. A red light flared in his eyes. He would take advantage of the time barrier's effect to force control with Imperio. With her natural barrier down and her 36 inactive, Matthew's Imperio struck her too directly. A red glow passed through Ida's eyes. The Imperio took hold. He hurriedly canceled the barrier of time. Using time power on a living being consumed enormous reserves, and the longer the influence lasted, the faster the drain. That single operation had used 5 months' worth of time power accumulated in the 21. Fortunately, the 21 automatically accumulated time power from the River of Time and required no resources to replenish. Still, only 2 months' accumulation remained, nowhere near enough for another operation like that. If the Wizard Tower weren't so important, Matthew wouldn't have spent his trump card purely to prevent Ida from fleeing. When he deactivated the barrier, Ida regained motion, but she was under his control. "Let's go over there," Matthew said, pulling her away from the other wizards so nothing unusual would be noticed. She gave a few orders to the workers, then left with him out of sight. In a deserted place, Matthew sifted through her memories. After a moment, he let out a relieved breath. The Land of Mist wasn't building this base because they discovered the Wizard Tower. They intended to create a node linked to 6th Ring Wizard City. Once established, the node would be maintained long-term, allowing travel between the two worlds via crossing spheres and return spheres. The connection between the Wizarding World and the Gap World wasn't fixed one-to-one. Leaving the base might not return to 6th Ring Wizard City. It could send travelers to another country entirely. The Emerald Kingdom seemed to be planning something against the Blizzard Kingdom. They wanted a hidden base connected to 6th Ring Wizard City. Building an obvious base inside 6th Ring and amassing wizards would be easily detected, so the Land of Mist was setting up its node in the Gap World to conceal people. This base is too close to the Wizard Tower, Matthew thought. Luckily there's mist, otherwise the tower might be visible from here. He couldn't allow the base to stay. Killing everyone outright wasn't ideal. If they died, other Land of Mist members might come and re-establish a base. Better to have them relocate, and Ida had the authority to order a move. She was in charge of the mission. Morris told me this area is territory of a powerful 16. I need to confirm it. If it can't be dealt with, we'll have to change the base location, Ida told her subordinates under Matthew's control. She left with him for a while, then returned and announced she'd found a 16 that couldn't be handled. The area was unsuitable. The group packed up, returned to 6th Ring Wizard City, and would re-enter the Gap World to find a new spot later. The immediate threat was averted, but the episode reminded Matthew that as long as people explored the Gap World, the Wizard Tower could still be discovered. Back at the tower, he asked Zero if there was a solution. "I can prioritize repairing the Zero, but I have to find it first. The other tower spirit cores are estimated to be within the range of the 40-47, 12 replied. The refining of the ones had finished. Matthew decided to tackle the 47 problem first. 338. Clean the 6th floor. Matthew retrieved the prepared 4 and headed up to the 6th floor of the Wizard Tower. The device was a green sphere, unremarkable to the eye. The tower spirit had given him simple instructions. Inject 4-2 energy to activate it, then throw it. After sending the 16s to clear the 6th floor, Matthew drew on 4-2 power, activated the device, and hurled the sphere at the 35. He left the floor immediately. A muffled sound followed, then a corrosive explosion. Hiss! An unpleasant, searing roar filled the corridor. The bomb had detonated inside the 35 and awakened whatever lived within. Matthew waited a few minutes to let the residual toxic vapor dissipate before returning. The 30 had been transformed. The corrosive blast had torn a hole several meters across in its surface. From that gaping wound, a steady flow of blood poured, revealing a mass of mangled flesh and appendages inside. The creature within had been grievously injured. As Matthew stepped closer, clusters of broken arms, legs, segmented limbs, claws, and tentacles writhed outward, as if 1,000 small bodies were pressed together and spilling from the breach. There were far more creatures fused into the thing than Matthew had expected. Many from the bioworkshop's ecological zone had been absorbed and assimilated. This monstrosity had bound countless organisms into itself and had been lying dormant inside the 35, using accumulated life force to build the outer sphere and its fleshy walls. In that weakened evolutionary state, the shell had served as protection. Now the shell was breached and its evolution had been interrupted. Countless limbs surged at Matthew. He needed to know whether the creature's flesh walls still absorbed mana the way the meatball-like outer tissue had. He swept his 44 and condensed a giant, arc-shaped blade of 42 power that slashed through the onrushing limbs. Crack! Over a dozen limbs were severed at once. It worked. The limbs did not share the same exaggerated mana absorption as the outer flesh walls. Matthew allowed himself a small, relieved breath. The monster's magical signature was stronger than Count Brando's had been. Count Brando had been a formidable wizard, augmented twice or thrice by the third-tier bloodline secret art. This creature, even interrupted, reached near the limit of a second-level wizard. Had it completed its evolution, it might have broken free as a third-level threat. Now, however, its power fluctuated wildly, sometimes peaking like a second-level wizard, then dipping below a first level. The interrupted evolution had left it unstable and severely wounded. Matthew took the 19 time from his pocket. He had already linked with the wisp inside the artifact and could cast spells through it. This creature would be an excellent test subject. 3 small spheres rose before him. The alchemy workshop had altered them, removing the original 10 sigils and rerouting their function. High-voltage arcs laced over the spheres, and in an instant 3 brilliant lightning bolts leaped out, incinerating every limb they passed. Countless appendages turned to charcoal where the bolts struck. The monster bellowed in rage and pushed out yet more limbs. These weren't mere replacements, but the components of its body. It absorbed other life forms by stitching them in, turning non-essential parts into raw life energy to sustain the flesh walls. That accumulation was why the outer tissue had been so hard to breach. It was a defensive barrier of concentrated life force. The limbs that crawled free acted almost like independent avatars, skittering across the floor in a writhing carpet of unnatural shapes. "This thing is disgusting," Matthew muttered. The sight of severed humanoid limbs scuttling along the ground made his skin crawl. As the limb creatures neared, several suddenly detonated in showers of blood. The 3 spheres flared with golden flame and flung themselves into formation, quickly generating a triangular, golden fire barrier in front of Matthew. All the blood splashed at him was consumed by the flames. The spheres drifted apart to widen the triangle until each side measured more than 10 meters. The trio floated forward, sweeping the barrier across the floor and incinerating the crawling remnants. Inside the 35, the creature's magical output dipped. After the flurry of limb deployment, it dropped to first-level strength. It rallied, though, and its output climbed back towards second level. The remaining mass of flesh writhed together and formed a single enormous arm, 7 or 8 meters long. Matthew's expression tightened. That fleshy arm absorbed 42 power, the same trait he had feared. He materialized wings of wind at his back and fled. The tower's interior had the room for flight. As he put distance between himself and the appendage, the giant arm slammed down on the golden barrier and shattered it. The arm had mana absorption. Close combat now was too risky. He chose to strike the core. The 3 metal spheres of the 19 were under his magical control. They acted as extensions of himself and let him cast from other positions. While evading the pursuing arm, he directed the spheres to form a triangular curtain of crackling electricity. Within that curtain, a high-voltage thunder spear condensed, thunderous strike, an instantaneous 42 discharge. Matthew had learned from the ancient Egyptian schools. Its strength scaled with the amount of mana fed into it. He had never found its upper limit. As the spear formed, the air charged so heavily that the hairs on his arms prickled. Then the spear shot forward in a blinding white arc. Boom! A thunderclap ripped through the floor. The pursuing arm froze mid-swing, lost control, and toppled to the ground. It continued to writhe with residual life force for a time before collapsing into a steaming pool of flesh and blood. The main mass of the creature lay in charred ruin. Matthew spared a quick, anxious glance at the spot where the tower spirit core had been. I hope I didn't damage the tower spirit core left here. He had been careful, not even using the full force of his 42 for thunderous strike, precisely to avoid harming anything vital. He called the 616s back to clean up the aftermath and instructed them to deliver the remains to the bioworkshop for study. Perhaps the waste could be recycled. After sorting through the debris, the 16 recovered 2 tower spirit cores buried in the wreckage, the Defense Tower Spirit Core and the Great Library Tower Spirit Core. 0. Assess the condition of the 2 cores, Matthew ordered. 0 activated, directing the 6 to examine the fragments. A little while later, the report came through. Defense Tower Spirit Core, damaged 68%, repair and restart possible. Great Library Tower Spirit Core, damaged 89%, repair not possible, data extraction only. Both cores had not been outright destroyed by Matthew. Like other cores found within the flesh walls, the meatball-like tissue had siphoned off their self-protection, and they had been slowly corroded. Prioritize repairing the Defense Tower Spirit Core, Matthew told 0. Hogwarts. Today was Christmas, and the evening feast promised a grand celebration. Because of the Tri-Wizard tournament, this year's Christmas was special. Students from 8 schools had been invited. There would be dancing, and everyone needed a partner. The students, received a flood of invitations. Just after class, Matthew found himself cornered at the doorway again. Matthew, do you have a dance partner? Fleur Delacour asked brightly. If you don't, pick one of us, Gabrielle Delacour added hopefully. Matthew laughed. Gabrielle, you're only 8. Are you coming to the ball too? Of course, but I don't have a partner. I hope you'll ask me, Gabrielle replied bluntly. Sorry, I already have a partner, Matthew said gently, refusing the 2 French girls. Gabrielle sighed dramatically. She admired Matthew. He had saved her sister and shown astonishing strength during the tournament. That had impressed her far more than any title or medal. In potions that afternoon, the 4th-year Gryffindors and Slytherins were present. For Harry, it was his first potions class since changing back, and he felt the old, oppressive gaze of Snape pressing down on him. Snape's mood was sour. His face stayed dark throughout the lesson. Harry remembered how tolerant Snape had been when he'd been a girl. Why had that been? Did Snape favor girls? No, Snape had been cold to other Gryffindor girls too. Had Harry been special? Potter! Snape's voice cut through his thoughts. Did you leave your ears outside? He sneered. Harry blinked. He had been staring blankly and realized he hadn't even opened his textbook. Ron beside him was frantically gesturing at the book on Harry's desk. What was open was his homework notebook, not the textbook. It seems Potter has so thoroughly mastered the technique for handling Shrivelfig's skin that he no longer needs to consult the text, Snape mocked. Very well, Potter, demonstrate how to process Shrivelfig's skin for the class. I haven't, Harry began quickly. It was new material. He hadn't previewed it. Then why did you not open your textbook? Snape asked coldly. Sorry, Professor. I was distracted, Harry said honestly. When he'd been a girl, that kind of frankness had sometimes earned Snape grudging praise. Today brought no such mercy. Distracted in my class. You will stand for the remainder of the lesson. Snape's tone allowed no appeal. Harry had no choice. He had briefly thought that Snape's attitude toward him had been improving, but that illusion collapsed. At least Snape didn't take house points this time, Harry thought with a wry inner sigh. He found himself missing the ease of the time when he'd been a girl, fewer quarrels with Ron, more tolerance from Hermione. Speaking of Hermione, she was absent today. Harry scanned the room and realized she wasn't sitting with the usual early arrivers at the front. If she took leave, she would have told us, Harry murmured, frowning. He would ask Hermione's roommate after class. Before the lesson ended, Snape called on him again. Potter, how must a Grafforn horn be prepared to serve as a potion ingredient? It needs to be ground into powder and sun-dried for 2 weeks, Harry answered correctly. His detention with Snape had given him access to a well-annotated copy of advanced potion-making, and that study paid off now. When the bell finally rang, Harry leaned toward Ron. Did you notice? Hermione wasn't in class. 339. Hermione vanished. What are you talking about? How could she have missed class? Ron said, sounding dismissive as he looked around and couldn't find Hermione. She must have slipped out of the classroom for a bit. You know her. Her schedule's packed. Some courses were electives. Harry and Ron hadn't filled their timetables too tightly, but Hermione was different. She kept her time tightly organized. It's not that, Harry said. I noticed she didn't come in during the lesson. What? Hermione actually missed class? Did she oversleep? Ron exclaimed. Seeing Ron had no explanation either, Harry decided to go straight to Hermione's roommates. To his surprise, they came to him first, but not about Hermione. Ron, have you found a partner for tonight's Yule Ball yet? Lavender asked, smiling. Huh? Ron glanced instinctively at Harry, then remembered he'd switched back to his usual look. He sounded a little deflated. Not yet. Lavender curled her lip and stated her purpose bluntly. Ron, I want you to go with me tonight. Huh? Ron was stunned. He'd never been asked like that and froze for a moment. Harry jabbed him in the ribs with an elbow. Ron snapped out of it and hurriedly agreed. Okay, I haven't asked anyone. Then it's settled, Lavender cried happily. Parvati turned to Harry. Harry, have you got a partner? Harry scratched his face. Sorry, I already do. He and Ginny had arranged it long ago. Oh, that's okay, Parvati said, a little disappointed. Harry took the chance to ask, by the way, why didn't Hermione come to class? Parvati and Lavender exchanged surprised looks. Now that you say that, I didn't see her when I got up this morning, Parvati confessed. I thought she'd been in the library early. You didn't see her either? Lavender asked hesitantly. Could she not have come back at all last night? No way. Would she stay out all night? Parvati said in disbelief. Hermione was out last night? We were together in the common room, but she left before us. Ron frowned. Harry and Ron had been playing cards and only noticed Hermione left earlier. They didn't know if she went out afterward. Then let's ask around, Harry said. Lavender and Parvati hadn't seen where Hermione had gone. From what they knew, she might not have returned to the dormitory after last night. Harry and Ron questioned every Gryffindor of their year, but found nothing. They asked students in other houses and older pupils, still no news. This was very abnormal. They searched from morning until afternoon. The Yule banquet was about to begin. After that, the Christmas holidays would begin, and Ron would go home, making it even harder to find her. She's not in the dormitory. Could she have gone into the Forbidden Forest? Ron suggested. They went back to the dorms to get the Marauders map to try to locate Hermione, but her dot didn't show up anywhere on it. Where did she go? The banquet's about to start. Ron was getting anxious. He still had to change for the feast. Do you think she's hiding because she doesn't have a partner? He fretted. Whatever the reason, we have to find her. What if something's happened? Harry said. Hogwarts wasn't always safe. He'd seen too many things go wrong. Besides, not long ago, Matthew Black had warned him that Professor Moody might be someone in disguise, a possible Death Eater, and after helping Matthew that night, they had no proof to show anyone. All right, I just hope she didn't do this on purpose. My ball plans are ruined, Ron muttered. Hermione isn't on the Marauders map, so she definitely isn't back in the castle. Let's check the Forbidden Forest. But it's huge and dangerous. Let's get a few more people to help, Harry said. He planned to ask Ginny, since he might miss the ball anyway. Asking her to join the search wouldn't count as breaking their date. A moment later, Harry and Ron found Ginny and told her what had happened. Hermione's been missing since last night? Then, let's go find her. Ginny was disappointed at the idea of missing the ball, but she joined them without hesitation. They went to Hagrid's hut to see if he had seen Hermione come that way, but Hagrid wasn't there. He probably went to the banquet, Harry said. I heard him say he wanted to dance with Madame Maxime. Let's take Fang with us. Maybe he'll pick up her scent, Ron suggested. Fang was cowardly, but his nose was keen. Fang, Hermione's missing and might be in the forest. Can you help us find her? Harry asked, producing a packet of dried meat from his pockets. Fang, tempted by the jerky, didn't refuse. They followed Fang across the boundary into the forbidden forest and slipped in. The tournament officials were on holiday, so there were no staff out. Because the ministry people usually patrolled the outer edges of the forest, the acromantula packs that had run amok before had been pushed back into the deeper areas. Fang suddenly lifted his nose and started leading them purposefully, stopping and listening as he went. Fangs found Hermione's scent. She really did come into the forest, Ron said, excitement and relief flooding him. Still, the thought that Hermione might have been in the forest for a day without coming out made them anxious again. By the way, Ginny said, Luna said that Preserved Egg and Crookshanks sometimes go into the forest. Have you seen Crookshanks? They all shook their heads. Crookshanks? Are you looking for Crookshanks too? Meow. A sudden voice mewed, startling them. A black cat perched on a branch above and leaped down. Preserved Egg, we were just looking for you, Ginny cried. Preserved Egg hopped closer. What are you looking for me for? Do you want to find Crookshanks with me, Meow? Preserved Egg told them that after nearly a day of searching, he still hadn't found his friend. Crookshanks is missing too? Harry said in surprise. Too? Is your Hathaway missing, Meow? Preserved Egg asked curiously. My Hathaway is fine. It's Hermione who's missing, Harry said. Hermione's missing. I saw her last night, Meow. Preserved Egg said, shocked. When did you see her? Ron demanded. It was after curfew. One of my companions followed her to look for Crookshanks, and then we split up in the Forbidden Forest. Meow, Preserved Egg explained. You didn't see her after you parted in the forest? Lavender and Parvati said she didn't return to the dormitory last night. She's been missing nearly a day, Harry said. I didn't know she hadn't come back. If I'd known, I wouldn't have gone to check on the task area, Meow, Preserved Egg said regretfully. The task area? Harry repeated. The tournament committee people probably set something up there for the second task, Preserved Egg explained. Hermione and I met a suspicious person in the forest. I wasn't sure if he was there to check out the task area or if he meant harm, so I went to see, leaving the others to look for Crookshanks. That task area looked a bit dangerous, so I sent one of my companions in alone, but the area seemed fine. The suspicious person was probably just scouting what the second task would be. Harry frowned. So you don't know where Hermione went after that either? No, Meow. Preserved Egg shook his head. But some of my other companions were out looking for Crookshanks last night, and I did see Hermione return to the castle, Meow. Hermione returned to the castle? But we can't find her on the Marauders map, Ron cried. Marauders map? Ginny asked. It's a map that shows everyone's location, Ron said awkwardly. Harry explained. Her location doesn't show up on the map, so we thought she wasn't in the castle. Ron looked up at the darkening sky and groaned inwardly. Where on earth is Hermione? He was almost certain he wouldn't make it to the ball now. He'd held out faint hope he'd find Hermione before the feast, and still go. That's why he hadn't told Lavender the truth. If he'd known, he'd have refused her outright. The thought of facing Lavender's questions later made his head ache. Hermione woke in utter darkness. Where am I? She wondered. Her head was foggy and throbbing. She tried to lift her hands to her head, but they were tied behind her. Panic flared. Her mouth, too, was muffled with a strip of cloth. I've been kidnapped, she thought. Kidnapping only happened in stories. This couldn't be real. As her head cleared a little, she recalled the evening before. She had been searching for Crookshanks with Preserved Egg. They'd met someone suspicious in the forest. Preserved Egg had gone to check the task area while she had walked back to the castle alone. After returning to the castle, she hadn't gone back to the dormitory, but had kept looking for Crookshanks in the corridors. She realized, with a cold certainty, that she must have been attacked somewhere along the way. She tried to remember where. She could picture passing an ordinary corridor when a wall had slid open and she had been struck by a spell. Then everything had gone black. She tried to call for help, but the cloth gag muffled her voice. She shifted and discovered the space around her was very narrow. Something collided with her forehead with a heavy thud, sharp pain, then the sound of scratching from the other side. That's claws on wood, Hermione thought. She knew that sound. Crookshanks. A familiar meow came from outside. It really is Crookshanks, she breathed. Struggling, she shoved herself toward the sound. Thump, thump, bang. She managed to force the door of what she'd assumed was a wooden enclosure open and tumbled out, pain bringing tears to her eyes. Crookshanks began to chew at the ropes binding her hands and feet until they came loose. Hermione snatched at the gag and pulled it away. Freedom, finally. Crookshanks, thank you, she whispered, scooping the cat into her arms. Crookshanks replied with a contented meow. Hermione took a breath and looked around. She was in a vast, cluttered room, crates, trunks, and old furniture piled everywhere. The thing that had held her had been an old cabinet. Before she could explore further, she heard a sound outside. The wall had shifted, forming a doorway. Someone was coming. Quickly, Hermione shoved the discarded ropes and the gag into the cabinet and shut the door, then hid among the clutter. The door opened, but no one entered for a moment. Hermione watched, tense, as a figure suddenly appeared in front of the cabinet. She knew instantly a disillusionment charm was covering the stranger. When the glamour faded, she could see the person clearly, a woman with long black hair arranged in an intricate updo, held with an ornate hairpin. She wore a kimono printed with pale cherry blossoms, white tabi socks, and wooden platform geta. Miss Kiyomi? Hermione's heart clenched. The woman who had apparently knocked her out was none other than Kiyomi, the principal of Mahutokoro. How could it be her? Hermione's heart hammered in her chest. She had never imagined that the person who had kidnapped her would be Miss Kiyomi, the principal of Mahutokoro. She held her breath, afraid the woman would discover her hiding place. When Miss Kiyomi opened the cabinet where Hermione had been imprisoned, her figure stiffened for a moment. She drew her wand and scanned the room with practiced alertness. She already knew, or at least pretended to know, that Hermione had escaped. "Come out, I've already found you," Miss Kiyomi said coldly. Hermione shivered and froze, though Miss Kiyomi hadn't actually seen her yet. She was bluffing. The room was cluttered with trunks and piles of forgotten things, perfect for a hidden person, but difficult to search. Miss Kiyomi moved carefully, but the clutter made every corner a possible hiding place. When Hermione realized the woman was bluffing, panic tightened her throat. Then Miss Kiyomi laughed darkly, waved her wand, and began firing explosion charms indiscriminately in all directions. Boom, boom, boom. They were inside the room of requirement. No matter how loud the noises, they wouldn't escape into the castle. Still, the blasts tore through the cramped space, sending dust and debris into the air. Hermione clutched Crookshanks and darted farther back as the explosions forced her to keep moving. A blast struck the spot she'd just left. The shock masked the creak of her footsteps on the wooden floor and sent up a choking cloud that temporarily blinded Miss Kiyomi. But the more Miss Kiyomi fired, the fewer safe places remained. Hermione scrambled on, heart pounding, until she ran into a dead end. Dust filled her lungs and smoke stung her eyes. She turned and watched in horror as the spells drew ever closer. Am I going to die here? She thought, as memories, childhood and more recent moments, flashed through her mind. Meanwhile, in the great hall, the Yule Ball was in full swing. The hall had been transformed into a dream of ice and snow. Christmas trees lined the aisles, draped in lights and ornaments. Crystal-like ice sculptures hung from the eaves, and icicles shimmered like curtains. Soft white light bathed the room, and paper snowflakes drifted down, sparkling as they fell. Students and teachers moved about in formal wear. Matthew and Luna, both newly dressed for the ball, cut an especially elegant figure. Matthew wore a classic black suit with a neat bow tie that drew admiring glances. Luna was like a fairy tale princess in a long white gown. Her dark golden-brown hair was pinned into a loose bun with strands framing her face. The neo-rococo off-the-shoulder neckline showed the curve of her neck and shoulders, edged with lace and embroidery. The bodice hugged her gently. Long white gloves reached her wrists, and the skirt of tulle and silk billowed like flower petals. Her white heels completed the look. Their outfits had been custom-made. The tailor had enjoyed showing their picture on the shop's wall more than taking payment. "This dress is beautiful," Luna said, smiling as she leaned on Matthew's arm. She had grown to 165 centimeters, and with heels she could easily rest on him. "It's even more beautiful on you," Matthew murmured. They were interrupted by Professor McGonagall, who approached them in a flurry of worry. "Have you seen Potter?" she asked. "No," Matthew said. "Is something wrong?" McGonagall fussed. "I can't find him. The champions must dance the opening dance. It's tradition, even with the Triwizard tournament back in place. Wait in the room behind the stage for the dance. I must find Potter. Honestly, Weasley and Granger aren't here either. Where are they?" Matthew took Luna's hand and led her toward the room behind the stage. The other champions and their dates were assembling. Their arrival drew attention and a little envy. After a while, McGonagall returned, looking more anxious. "I still can't find Potter, but there's no time. The feast is starting. Go on and dance the opening dance," she said. With more than 20 champions this year, one missing pair wouldn't be conspicuous. They took their partners' arms and walked the red carpet to the center of the dance floor as applause rang out. The orchestra began, and the champions prepared to dance. Matthew offered his hand, and Luna placed hers in it. "I haven't danced much, Matthew," Luna admitted, squeezing his hand. "Don't worry, I'll lead. Just follow the beat," he replied, his other hand settling at her waist. Even through gloves, they felt each other's warmth. As the music flowed, they moved together, Matthew steady and sure, counting the beats in his head until Luna no longer needed it. He spun her. Her skirt fanned out like a blossom. Loose strands of hair leapt with the motion. At the end, Matthew held her in a graceful pose, fingers resting gently on her waist. For a few suspended seconds, they were only inches apart, heartbeat against heartbeat, until the applause dragged them back to the present. After the opening dance, the floor filled and others began dancing. A little later, Luna grew hungry and they slipped away to fetch food. With plates in hand, they found a quieter outdoor corridor where star-splattered night sky was visible. "Matthew, you seem different," Luna said, tilting her head. "Oh, how different?" he asked, smiling. "You look the same, but more charming somehow," she said, puzzled. Luna had sensed the change that had come after Matthew condensed the 8 of the Manticore. It wasn't a mere tweak of his features, but a subtle widening of his charisma. "Maybe you're under my charm," Matthew joked, offering her a slice of apple. "If that's the case, I won't be able to break free," Luna laughed and took a bite. They finished their food and decided to stay away from the crowded hall. Matthew's expression shifted. "Nothing. Preserved Egg is trying to find me. I told him to meet here." Preserved Egg arrived, accompanied by Harry, Ron, and Ginny. "Why aren't you at the ball? McGonagall even went to the common room to look for you," Matthew asked. "The ball's started." "Oh no, it might already be almost over," Ron fretted. "Hermione's missing. We're looking for Hermione." "Meow," Preserved Egg announced. "Hermione's missing?" Matthew asked. "Where have you searched?" "Inside the castle and outside it. We even checked the Forbidden Forest, though we didn't go far in because Preserved Egg said he saw Hermione returning to the castle last night," Harry said helplessly. A light flickered in Matthew's eyes, and he expanded his sense, a perception he used to scan the area. It couldn't identify a person by name, but it could detect the ebb and flow of 38 power. Familiar patterns stood out. If Hermione were somewhere sparsely populated, he might locate her this way. His current range covered over 2,000 meters, more than enough to cover the grounds outside the castle. "She's not outside," he thought, then pushed his sense through the castle walls. His perception could penetrate the gray fog of the Gap world. The castle itself posed no problem. She's not in the castle proper either. His sense swept through most places, even the headmaster's office, yet several locations remained difficult to probe. The Chamber of Secrets deep beneath Slytherin House, the Goblins' Elev Chamber, and the Room of Requirement. The Room of Requirement contained a pocket space similar to an undetectable extension charm. His perception couldn't reach into its private recesses. Could she be in the Room of Requirement? Matthew guessed. The Chamber of Secrets would be nearly impossible to access without Parseltongue. The Goblin Chamber had been sealed again. By elimination, the Room of Requirement was the likeliest place. One could stumble across it by chance. Fred and George once discovered its secret by luck. "Luna, where do you feel like going right now?" Matthew asked. The room of requirement? Luna answered after a thoughtful pause. I was thinking the same thing, Matthew said, smiling. Luna's instincts were still as uncanny as ever. The room of requirement. Harry looked intrigued. You haven't found that place yet? I'll take you, but it's not easy to get into. Matthew tapped his plate. It sprouted legs and walked back to the Great Hall on its own. It changes to match what you need, Luna said. The group headed to the 8th floor corridor opposite the Barnabas the Barmy tapestry. I've been here before. There isn't a room here, Ron grumbled. Matthew stopped opposite the tapestry. Think of the room you need. Walk past 3 times and it will appear, he instructed. Really? Okay, let me try. Ron paced back and forth, muttering, I want to go to Hermione's room. After 3 passes, a smooth door slid into the wall. Ron opened it excitedly, but the inside was styled like the Gryffindor girls' dormitory. That's not what I meant, Ron said, stunned. Luna took a drop of Felix Felicis and drank it. A sudden inspiration struck her. She concentrated, thinking, I want to go to the room where things are hidden. Light-footed in her heels, she paced back and forth 3 times. A smooth door appeared again. Her intuition prickled. What she sought was inside. Luna pushed the door open, and a series of explosions punched out from the room beyond. Matthew's face tightened. They'd found the right place. The room of requirement had rearranged itself into a cluttered cavern of mismatched furniture, trunks, crammed shelves, and forgotten artifacts. Dust and smoke filled the air, and the sharp staccato of explosion charms continued. At the center of the chaos, Miss Kiyomi kept blasting, forcing out whoever was hiding. Hermione hugged Crookshanks to her chest, ducking and dodging toward the back. She slipped and hit a wall. The air was thick with choking dust. She could no longer see the path. The spells were closing in. It's a dead end, she realized aloud. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of her own pulse and the rumble of magic around her. Memories flickered, childhood summers, the faces of friends, the layered moments that made up her life.